Hi, everyone. I'm Carrie Cassidy from Project Camelot and very happy to be here today. So I've got Sean David Morton with me, and it's lovely to have him here. He's actually looking very well. And he's got, I don't know, his Space Invaders outfit, whatever that is.
Oh yeah, it's my Octurian commander or something. You look like a Palladian princess today, as usual. You're not wearing your white with your buttons
Oh, no,
for your rank in the
I know you,
Palladian Air
you
Force.
really like that. So maybe I should have,
Are you not Palladian? Are you something else?
Well, no, actually, I think I do. I am part Palladian for
There you go.
sure.
See, you're probably got that Rh negative blood and AB positive.
Not Rh negative, no.
Okay, all right.
But I'm not positive about my blood, but I don't think it's Rh negative. But
okay,
this is not the subject of the show. So
why not? Why shouldn't it be?
Okay, Sean.
Okay.
It's wonderful to have you on my show. And
Thank you.
I'm going to put your, actually, I'm going to put this on the screen so that people can see how fabulous your new book looks. It's very exciting, right?
And we finally have them in print. It's been months because I haven't been able to, this is book 4, Timerunner, Act 1. It's been optioned by Arch Creek is to be either a TV series or a major motion picture. So
wow.
that's in the works already, and we're talking to a lot of big people about turning Sands of Time. Matter of fact, Sean Stone helped a lot and had a lot to do with helping write the pilot for the Sands of Time TV series. Wow. So got to put some kudos out to Sean. He's the greatest. And so we got a pair of Sean's working on this, and we finally have the books. We finally have the books out there, so you can actually click us on Strange Universe Radio, actually, and it goes right to the webpage. And but the paperback books are back in print. That book is going to be a hardcover, dust jacketed limited edition. When I did Sands of Time first some years ago, the hardcover limited edition of the first book of Sands of Time is literally selling on eBay and Amazon for between $3,700 and $4,800. So that's so you can buy this book as an investment, signed by me, hardcover. There's only a limited edition. There's only a few of them available, so it's only going to be a few hundred or so in print, and then we're going to go to the paperback after that. But I wanted everybody to get it, so there you go. So once again, it's all there. And by the way, not only do we have the books, Sands of Time 1, Sands of Time 2, and Sands of Time 3, Isomer Protocol. This book which I finished last December, and I've just had a real problem finding a decent printer because nobody wants to do hardcovers anymore with dust jackets. That's impossible. And there's so many criminals out there in the print business. I won't name names, but finally got it done. Finally found a great printer right here in Southern California in Orange County, and a guy named Mohammed, who's fantastic. And I feel bad for him because he's going through Ramadan right now, so he can't eat or drink during the day. He's really cranky. I got to call him after the sun sets because he's had a chance to have a smoke and a drink. So there you go. So Timerunner is finally done, and it's Act 1. So this is Act 1 in a 3-act series. So I've got all 3 books all ready to go. It's just a question of getting them out there, but it's going to be Act 1, Act 2, and Act 3.
Oh, wow.
So it's going to be, this is just Act 1 of what's happening after people remember the end of Isomer Protocol. Basically, Ted Humphrey just strafes the board and dives into the time stream. And this is everything that happened to him. And it's kind of funny because he was gone off Earth for 18 years, but he comes back 444 days later because of the way the time stream operates when you're at the edges of the Milky Way, and so all that stuff. So very exciting, very good, fast-paced action adventure, and all coming right out of the diaries and the documents, which we're going to talk about today because they relate directly as to how I got them, and relate directly to a fellow by the name of Ghost Walker, who we've talked about, or whatever he calls himself now, Derek Hennessy or Connor Hennessy, because he used a couple of aliases, and that links directly into my discovery of the peak on Whitesides Mountain that could actually look down on Area 51, which triggered a whole series of things, which actually was kind of Act 2 in that story, because Act 1 had to do with Dulce, had to do with the scientific expedition that went out to Dulce, New Mexico, and northern New Mexico, just south of Durango, Colorado. But that then brings in a woman named Krista Tilton. This is just the preface of the show. Krista Tilton, who had been abducted, was taken inside the Dulce Mesa, that had a lot to do with Richard Doty's involvement in that. And what Richard Theory, oh, that's funny.
Oh, sorry. That was a mistake.
That's funny. I no longer identify as a conspiracy theorist. You
Oh,
might now
no.
refer to me as the bitch that was right the entire time. That's very good. Is that your
No, somebody, no, somebody sent that to me.
It's totally true, Carrie. Take out the B part, but that's totally true.
No, okay,
Yeah.
that wasn't supposed to show up. I was trying to
We love waving our fingers and saying, "We told you so. We were right all along." And
well, a lot of us are in that position, I think.
yeah, and it's kind of.
I think it's only just beginning, by the way.
Oh yeah, and I got to take a little credit. Wait, got to pat myself a little on the back because I predicted the exact date that we would see the beginning of the crisis point, not only in the United States, but also the Ukrainian war and conflict with Russia, because it came, and Vladimir Putin knew this, by the way. We can talk about it a little bit, but it's the first ingress of Pluto moving to 27 degrees Capricorn, which I predicted for years. And everybody's coming out now about the Pluto ingress, and everybody's coming out about Pluto moving over the spot in the chart of the United States. And I was the one that said this would be the beginning of the end of the United States, the beginning of a social collapse, political collapse, that it's going to have to do with an inevitable war with Russia, because the war was it was inevitable. Because when you talk about the New World Order and you talk about Putin, who was it Nathan Rothschild who said that Vladimir Putin is public enemy #1 to the New World Order? And Putin said, "I will strangle the New World Order with my bare hands if necessary." And Putin was the one that said to Trump, before you get out of being president of the United States, please tell the world everything you know about 9/11. And
that's right.
There are 27 alien races we're in contact with, 3 of which are actively trying to destroy us, which is what Sands of Time is all about. So, and that's the president of Russia telling our president exactly what's going down. And it's one of the reasons why the New World Order guys, and let me say this up front, it's not a New World Order. It's a really old world order, which you and I both know.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's the original, it's Baal, it's Moloch, it's the serpent gods. It goes all the way back to the snake in the garden where Eve says, "Well, I'm not supposed to eat that apple." And the snake goes, "Oh no, that's just disinformation. We've had that fact checked by all our experts. So it's perfectly fine for you to eat that apple, Eve. Go ahead, go ahead."
Well, the apple is now COVID, and it's perfectly fine for you to get jabbed.
The serpent's name was really Oprah, because you say the same thing that the serpent in the garden said, going, "You're a strong, independent woman. Don't listen to no man talking to God. They all think they talk to God. What's wrong with you?"
Okay,
so there you go.
Let's keep in mind that's a metaphor. So moving along.
God's a metaphor.
Right
okay. Yes. Okay. So moving right along. So where do you want to start? Let's start. You want to start at the beginning? The beginning.
Yeah. Why don't we do that?
All right. So starting at the beginning. This is how I got back into. Well, it's how I got kind of involved in all this UFO stuff, because again, I had been, I'd sold some scripts, and I was involved in rock music videos, and then Hollywood shut down for like 2 years. WGA shut down. Writers Guild and SAG both just totally closed for about 2 years in the early 80s. So I owned a nightclub. I owned a couple of restaurants. Was doing a whole bunch of other stuff. And so I got sucked into this whole thing in 1989. I was always involved in it because of Fred Bell. And Fred had always been Uncle Fred. He'd always been a close friend of the family. I knew him since I was about 4 or 5 years old, I guess, because Fred Bell had been a checkout engineer for Apollo, and he was only 23, I think. He graduated from the University of Michigan at the age of 14, and was the youngest checkout engineer on the most complicated machine ever made. Now, we're going to talk about George Van Tassel as well. So, cool. Because there was a whole new thing on George Van Tassel, and I knew Mr. Van Tassel.
Please, let's talk about him, because I'm not going to say somebody out there is referring to him and so on. I'm listening. I just, I told you, I just woke up. I just have to get something to drink.
Okay, that's fine. I'll just go ahead and talk to this empty chair here. Hello, empty chair. I feel like Clint Eastwood at the Republican convention. So hi, empty chair. How are you? That's okay. At least the empty chair won't interrupt me. So, all right. So here we go. So here's Dulce. So the interesting thing about this is that I'd known Fred Bell since I was like 5, and Fred actually quit NASA and Rocketdyne and Rockwell because he wrote a report, and he basically turned in NASA saying that the Apollo 1 was substandard, that the wiring was bad, that it was going to catch fire, predicted everything was going to happen with Apollo 1, which then killed um, one of my greatest friends and sort of like my second father, Gus Grissom, in Apollo 1. As a matter of fact, Don Isley was originally scheduled to be on Apollo 1 with Gus. And Don was actually swimming at our swimming pool, and he put me up on his shoulders, and he slipped on the diving board, and I landed on his shoulder and dislocated his shoulder,
Oh my
which is
God.
what took him off Apollo 1 and saved his life.
Wow.
So when I was in college, one of the reasons why we went out to go say hi to George Van Tassel
But wait,
is,
is that the guy that you think is your father, Gus Grissom?
well, other people have said that, so I'm not. I asked my mom once if he was, and my mom said, no, I just have horrible taste in people. So I was like, well, I really wanted Gus Grissom to be my dad rather than my dad, but so there's that. So I don't
Okay,
know. There's
I wondered.
an affair thing going on there between my mom and Gus is all I can tell you. Um, when my mother died and I was going through all of her stuff, she had his flight patch actually in her dresser drawer. And for the life of me, I just did not think I should take this. I should, this was after she died. We're going through her stuff, but he had, you know,
Right.
Virgil Grissom on the flight patch, and Virgil Ivan Grissom, I think is what it was. Anyway, so long story short, Fred had actually built a time machine in his backyard, an actual working physical time machine. The thing was it was a dodecahedron that had a big pyramid on the top, a pyramid on the bottom. It had a ring around the outside. And it was about level. The boarding platform was about level with the porch, because the house was about 4 stories, I think. But this thing worked twice, and I mean, I watched it disappear and reappear and disappear and reappear 2 times. We thought we would have to take well, both times we should have taken Fred to the hospital because he was in pretty messed up shape. So I'd had some experience with the time machine stuff and all that. So this really takes the story back, because this is the 70s when I got down to USC, because I'd gone to Stanford and then I went to USC, and we went out to the desert, out to Giant Rock, because some people were saying, hey, you can go see UFOs out there and it's pretty cool. And Giant Rock in Landers, California was the Area 51 of the late 50s and 60s. Thousands of people used to go out there. They used to camp out there. They had big UFO conventions where you had people like Gabriel Green and Hal Wilcox and all the original people. And so Van Tassel by that time had actually built the Integratron, and the Integratron was interesting because I want to start there because it moves forward from there. I met George in 76, and then I continued to see him. He died in 77. And then I'd become friends with his widow, Dottie, or Dorothy, I think it was, who was really kind of crazy. I mean, we had meetings with her. It was 115 in the shade, and she was wearing a big wool coat and a wool hat and mittens and stuff. And but she was being hounded by the government and by the IRS. And so I helped her with some paperwork to get these government guys off her back. They claimed she owed taxes on a lot of things, whatever. So I became friends with the family. Now, it was interesting to me because somebody sent me an interview with Van Tassel. There's a lot of confusion about the Integratron and what it was and what it was supposed to be, which then leads up to Area 51 and time travel and all the stuff we're going to talk about, Looking Glass specifically. And we're going to talk about the 3 projects that were going on at 5-1, which was Project Galileo, and then Project Red Light, and then Project Looking Glass. And there's a bunch of different disinformation out there about Looking Glass, and I don't know who's making it up or who's doing what
Yeah,
with
it's
it.
insane right now.
But Looking Glass right now, they are telling you, okay, so this is the beginning, because you've got to listen to the whole interview now. They're telling us that the Looking Glass guys are saying that the city of New York is going to be nuked on Monday, so
Okay.
April 18th. So we'll talk about Looking Glass. We'll talk about what these guys are up to, and I'll tell you the truth about Looking Glass, about what Looking Glass actually was, and I presume continues to be, but it didn't have anything to do with the future. But we'll talk about artificial intelligence and how they do basically predictive political science to predict things. So anyway, so we went to Van Tassel's house, and we hung out with Van Tassel, and Van Tassel told us that he had been handed, now by this time, after he built the Integratron, remember that since the 50s, Giant Rock had been a gathering place for thousands of people who could go out there and watch UFOs. And you had this big giant rock. There was a guy that actually lived in a cave underneath the giant rock. And there was something going on where public officials wanted to take it away from him or take away his home or what have you. And I'm not sure you heard about this. He was a German immigrant, and he
Hmm.
invited all these government officials to his home underneath the rock. And then he basically was wearing like a dynamite vest, and he blew himself up and killed all these government guys because they were actually harassing him. I'm not sure if you heard that story or not, but that was one of the legends of Giant Rock. Um, the Indians had a big prophecy. It was the Chumash and I think the Tongva Indians talked about when the giant rock or the heart of the earth breaks, that it would be the beginning of the end times. Now, it was pretty freaky because on Easter Sunday of 2000, the rock, which is just a giant boulder that just sits, the big mystery is how did it get there? But the whole thing split in half, exactly as the Indians said it would, revealing this kind of white heart on the inside. So, so there was that. Anyway, so the actor who played Tom Hopalong Cassidy, he died out there rather mysteriously. It literally looked like there were no marks on his body, but it looked like somebody had shoved him out of a helicopter because he fell from a height onto these rocks. But it was the ultimate kind of closed door mystery. No footprints, no clues, no nothing. And after that, Giant Rock kind of fell into, I don't know, disabuse or disrepair. Not so many people went out there because of this going on. Now, this is the interesting thing about Van Tassel.
But it's right near the Integratron.
Yeah, it's right. Yeah, it's down the road about 2 or 3 miles. Now, let me tell you about the Integratron. Now, Van Tassel claims that an ET spaceman, a guy who looks just like us, who had other people on his craft or his ship. I think there were 6 of them total. And for the life of me, I forget the name. It was something like, I know George Adamski, his first contact was with a guy who claimed he was from Venus. And this was on the other side of where Giant Rock was, out by the, but it was Orthon was the name of the guy that he was in contact with. Now, Van Tassel had a guy that sounded similar to that. It was like Orsian or something like that. And he handed him a model for the Integratron. And he said most of like 60% or 70% of the power of the model, and I'm going to say something you're not going to like here in a second, the power of the model was where you put it. And he says, you need to put it right here. And he actually marked the spot. He said it has to be put right here because where the Integratron is actually sits on 6 electromagnetic ley lines actually run right through where the Integratron is, forming literally like a 6-pointed star where the Integratron's at. What people also don't understand is that not only is the Integratron on these 6 electromagnetic ley lines, which makes it super powered just standing in the spot, but it's also the location of where, I'm not sure how to describe this, but it's where the hinge is when you talk about the Juan de Fuco plate, which is what California rests on, and then how the Juan de Fuco plate then connects to the North American platelet. But this is the area that they talk about, that if California was to break off and slide into the ocean, like so many people like Gordon Michael Scallion and Dolores Cannon back in the day said was going to happen, this is where it would break. This hinge right there is where it would break. And on June 28th of 1992, you had a ginormous earthquake out there in Landers. It was a 7.6. And had that earthquake continued literally for another 30 to 60 seconds, you would have seen that crack in the fissure, which then would have led quite possibly to the big swim. And, California, possibly because the continental shelf of California sliding into the ocean, which was what Gordon Michael Scallion was talking about. Gordon was the kind of the Mac Daddy of earthquake predictors up until then. Now, the reason it leads to this is because on the date that earthquake happened, I'm out in front of my house on the Strand in Hermosa Beach with 1,000 of my neighbors in various states of undress who are watching a fleet, mind you, of these greenish avocado gourd looking UFOs all floating underneath the cloud cover at that time. And there are beams of bluish white light that were actually coming down out of the sky. This was on the news. This was on Channel 7, where they were trying to say that these were exploding transformers and whatever else. From that day forward, because I was working with a group of sensitives that I actually taught how to predict earthquakes using pendulums and maps and the whole thing. And after that point, suddenly the whole map was clear. Everything, and I specifically separated all these people, so I was getting different input from the group. And we were on the news quite a few times by literally calling people at Channel 9. I had a friend who ran the news desk saying there's going to be an earthquake that's going to happen on such and such a day, such and such a time. And they would happen. And they would come to my house on the day and say, we got Sean Morton here, just predicted the quake. And after that, the whole thing was clear. And after that also, that's when all of Gordon Michael Scalling's predictions went completely off the rail. That's why I started my Delphi Associates newsletter, because I was the only one that was saying, this is not going to happen now. It's going to be okay. Somehow, some way we've looked at, and it's weird because you can look in the book of Jonah, and Jonah talks about preaching to the people of Nineveh and then going up on this hill and waiting for the saucers to come destroy Nineveh. And he sits up there and the saucers all gather, and he says they were greenish and they looked like living gourds, is what he called them. Exactly like what we saw.
That's fascinating. Yeah.
Exactly like what we saw. And they didn't destroy the town because the people repented, and they all came up the hill to Jonah and they said, we want you to be our king. And Jonah's like, I don't want to be your king. I hate you people. Get out of here. I was hoping you'd all die. And they made him king of the town. So the only reason I mentioned that is because that's where the Landers Integratron was. Now the Integratron is the largest wooden domed building in the world, actually pure wood. And it was built along sacred geometry lines where there's no nails. There were no hammers that was used. The whole thing is put together literally with glue and pegs, because that's what the ET entity told Van Tassel how to build it. Now, it wasn't a time machine. This is where people get completely confused. It was a time machine in the essence of that the theory of, if the Integratron was to work properly, you could go into the Integratron, the whole thing would spin, and the way it was set up is it sits on a stalk, and then you have a top dome, the wooden dome in it, and that dome was supposed to actually spin. There's actually rubber and huge ball bearings underneath it, so the top part would actually rotate. Then he had 4 Tesla towers on either side, and the Tesla towers were to bring electromagnetic energy up from the earth at a very, very high frequency. And of course you can have several, what hurts you is watts and amperage, not volts. So you can have thousands of volts of electricity running through your body, like Tesla did when he was bathing himself. You've seen the pictures of him next to his alternate current generator, where he's got all the lightning bolts all around him and all that stuff, because the high frequency electricity doesn't hurt you. So the theory was you could stand in the middle of this thing. You could then, because on the ley lines and whatever else, and then the electricity would come up and it would go through your body, and it would supposedly rejuvenate the body to the point of where if you did this once every 10 years, you could live to be like 600 years old. This was Van Tassel's theory. So the way he got the money to do this, by the way, and very few people know this, but he worked as an engineer at Hughes Aircraft, and he got Howard Hughes interested in this device, along with the spaceman, along with the whole thing and whatever else. And Hughes was the one that actually provided the money to build, in essence, an immortality machine, which is what the Integratron was supposed to be. And of course, it was never finished. There was a man by the name of Emil Canning some years later that actually claimed that he had all the plans and all the stuff to be able to finish it, had the money, was going to do it, was working on it. And then his house burned down in the Oakland fires with all the paperwork. His was the second house that burned in these massive fires in Oakland, and the whole thing was kind of abandoned. Now it's owned by a religious group, and I think you can go there and you can get like a sound bath. Yeah, there it is. Thank you very much. So if you actually, yeah, they've redone it, and the whole place has been, see, this is where they do the sound baths. You see the crystal bowls on either side.
So yeah, they cleaned it up a lot. It was,
yeah, it's owned by a religious group who painted it, who did some nice thing to it. It's now considered
it's okay, but there, if you're saying that it has to do with reducing aging or reversing aging, that is time. You're talking about time.
Yeah,
so in a sense, that is a time, a kind. There's a lot of misunderstandings about what we call time travel, and also misunderstandings of what we call time.
Right.
So that's why that that there's a confusion there, but it wasn't built as that you could go into it and go to other places and other times necessarily.
Never.
Although, but it is a convergence of time of, well, I was going to say timelines, but in essence, what you're talking about, I don't know if you know Maria Wheatley, but she's a dowser, and she talks about it's called green energy.
Sure.
And that's what is generated when you get 6 lines coming in all together. And there's a lot of, there are a lot of people that understand vortexes and portals. And so in a sense, it could be converted into a time travel device, but it may not be outfitted that way at the moment.
Okay, well, again, that's in my personal conversations with Van Tassel. Van Tassel talked about time viewing, which is a whole other thing. By the way, this is the part that you weren't going to like. Probably the second most powerful vortex in California, where you have three massively powered electromagnetic ley lines running through the single location, actually runs through Disneyland, strangely enough. So it's the guy who designed Disneyland, and Disney Corp is not doing so well these days, but I'm saying that it's horrible. If you wait, you hear this sound? That's Walt Disney's head rolling around in the box where he's at for what they did to his company. But three of these ley lines, actually, here's some fun for you. Three of these ley lines run right through Fantasyland.
Well, do you think that the guy?
Hold on, let me finish the sentence.
Into the occult,
let me finish the sentence.
He would have selected it.
He would, because Disney contacted, when he realized he couldn't build it in Burbank, he contacted the Stanford Research Institute. And so SRI and this guy C.W. Wood, who also designed Magic Mountain, who also designed some of Knott's Berry Farm, but he had these three ley lines, and then he put the carousel. He transported the carousel from Burbank, put it right dead center where the ley lines were, and this carousel has a very interesting kind of loop to it, and it spins counterclockwise on top of that ley line, and it then generates, because Disneyland is built in the center of this big hill. It's where the trains all run around, and so it created this magical, mystical kind of vortex, where again the vortex is running right through a place where you have elves, you have dwarves, you have wicked witches, you have all the fantasy stuff.
Negative side, because it's counterclockwise.
Yeah, but the Earth rotates okay, we got to disagree on that, because the Earth rotates counterclockwise. Yeah, indeed. They closed it in 1984. The drawbridge went up for only the first time. Drawbridge went up. They redecorated the whole place to make it look like kind of a German village or something like that. And then the drawbridge came down again in 86, which, by the way, was the date that Tomorrowland was the future world of 1986, because it was all when Halley's Comet actually was going to come back around. So I'm just saying that it's very interesting. Now the ley line, the center of the ley line, which cuts the line, is you think this is interesting, because again, you got Project Camelot, and what sits right there on the ley line now, it's King Arthur's sword. It's the sword and the stone. And
I'll tell you one thing before you move on past the Integratron, that it might have been the first, I'm trying to think right now, but it actually might have been the first interview we ever did. So we interviewed Mr. X there, and that was the beginning of the official Project Camelot. I had already been doing interviews before I started Camelot, so you can't count those, but the one I did with Bill Ryan, and I actually let him take the lead because Mr. X contacted him through his serpo.org project.
Right.
That he got involved in as a spokesperson. So it's interesting that we were at the Integratron. That's where we did the interview, and that was the beginning of Camelot back in those days.
Okay. Cool. That's wonderful. So again, the whole point being is that the sword and the stone, the Excalibur sword, now sits exactly where the electrolytic limb is. So you put your hand on the sword, you can go around 7 times counterclockwise. You're supposed to be lucky. So there you go. Okay, so back to George Van Tassel. So Van Tassel did a series of interviews where he did talk about, because he was trying to get business and drum up money, where he did talk about the Integratron as a time machine, but he didn't explain that once you complete it, that it would extend the human lifespan to what he called apparently the galactic human lifespan is 1,000 years. The golden age lifespan, according to him, is between 400 and 600 years. And this was supposed to be what the Integratron would allow you to live through, which is why Howard Hughes was so interested in doing it. Now, he had an equation, which was interesting, which is F equals 1 over T as the equation for it. And that equation, the F standing for frequency and the 1 with the slash over time, he explained that he could then, and this gets us into the looking glass thing, that he could use this equation to view like any television show, to view anything that took place in the past. And he called that a time travel thing. It's some old black and white interviews where, he talks about the stuff that he originally contacted the aliens in 53. He had a photograph that was of the moon that had a moon base inside of it that he used to show around. And the question is whether or not that was us with the NSA landing on the moon sometime in 53, or whether there's the Nazis, or, I don't know, whatever else. But yeah, so that gets into Looking Glass. Now, let's get into Looking Glass. So that's George Van Tassel, the Integratron, whether or not they'll ever have the money to actually make it work. Also, from the thing that you just showed, one of the ways to do it, and I did this as an experiment, there's a suitcase-like device, which is called a multiple wave oscillator. And the multiple wave oscillator is basically a miniature Tesla coil. And you have it in a suitcase. I still have it. It's in storage someplace, which is like, it's like the lost ark is in there somewhere. But the idea of it was, if you set these up, you can then have a Tesla coil inside the suitcase, and then you have, you've probably seen these, but it's like a flat antenna that has copper in a spiral at the front. And we got a group of us in there where we got about 12 of these multiple wave oscillators, and we set them up on stands. So you can either stand or lay. The ideal thing was you were supposed to basically stand naked in the middle of a circle and then grease yourself up with olive oil, because olive oil is a great electrical receptor, and it keeps lactic acid from building up in your body. But you can put olive oil on your body, you stand in the center, and then you turn these multiple wave oscillators on, and it has kind of the same effect as the I mean, I couldn't sleep for a week after I did it. My girlfriend at the time, Junice, she started throwing up and had all kinds of things that were just purging out of her body, and it was all pretty weird. So now they just do the sound baths, but you're supposed to be sitting in the middle of the device to do that. But what Van Tassel did his interviews on was supposedly having an equation that would then allow him to see like reruns or old TV shows or stuff back in time. Okay, so we have that now. It's called Hulu or Netflix, or you can see all the guys on Star Trek who are dead now, and all there. So, all right, so let's get into the projects at 50. Oh, I'm sorry, let me finish Dulce. So we did an ultrasound on Dulce, and this is where you're going to bring Richard Doty into it because of an eyewitness. And again, I got nothing against the guy. I'm just going to tell you what the eyewitness said, and then we're also going to get into part of this whole journey had to do with why I was gifted with the Sands of Time, which has been called the greatest disclosure document ever written. And I really appreciate people who said that this is the greatest science fiction fact set of books that I've ever read. They're really cool. And the fact is there's so many secrets and they're just done in kind of a storytelling kind of way where you just kind of blaze by them. But again, my goal would be, if anybody out there knows how to get a hold of Elon Musk, I know he's goofing around with Twitter right now. But I mean, I have the patent on the unified field theory. I have the theory that makes time-space travel possible, that makes interdimensional or intergalactic or universal communication, where you can communicate with people.
The CIA has it, and he works with CIA and NASA, so I'm sure he can access it any day of the week.
All right. Again, if he does, we'll see. I don't know. It'd be nice to meet him and say, well, look, here's the unified field theory if you want to do so. Okay, so just the unified field theory. The release of this, I'm trying to get it out there. I'm making t-shirts. I've got it all over books and whatever else. All right, so at Dulce, and I explained a little bit this on the last interview. We took up the challenge of this guy Bill Moore, and Bill Moore, I don't know how he got onto UFOs to begin with, but from what I could tell, he was just an awful person. And he worked with Charles Berlitz, and he wrote a series of books about the Bermuda Triangle. And Charles Berlitz was the language expert, learned Spanish or French with the Berlitz language courses. And somehow he hooked into Berlitz, who then financed the whole thing. Now, he ran up against John Lear and Bill Cooper, of course, who were, well, John was a friend of mine. Bill Cooper, wasn't anybody's friend. But, and he said that he made up Dulce, that the whole thing about the base underground and the Dulce Wars and the challenges that we had with the extraterrestrials that we'd given them, that we gave them, that Eisenhower, when he made his first deal with the tall whites in February of 53, and then they told him, no, it was 54, I'm sorry. And then they told him the Greys would approach him at some point. They came in November of 54, and the Greys said, we don't care if you mess around with atomic weapons. We don't care about anything. We will give you technology in exchange for human genetics. And we'll kidnap people. We'll take eggs and sperm and whatever else. We'll wipe their brains and put them back, easy peasy, lemon squeezy. It's all you. No harm, no foul. But then they wanted bases to be able to carry out their supposed genetic experiments. And so we started giving them underground bases. Now, Dulce was built in 1955 on an existing cavern. One of the reasons why you have so many of these underground bases in Colorado and New Mexico is because that is where the Sierra plate actually then meshes, just like you have the Juan de Fuco plate that meshes with the North American plate, or the Sierra Nevada plate. That is where the plate of the North American platelet actually combines together. And so these mountains, the Sierras and the Rockies, well, you have the Rockies, the Sierras, and the Flatheads that all merged together in Colorado, right outside of Golden, Colorado. But it created a massive cave system. And the cave system extends from Carlsbad Caverns down in southern New Mexico, I think. And according to the Ojibwa, they went into these caverns for safety. They could go into the caverns and come all the way out somewhere up in Canada. And the Ojibwa claimed that they used to be the Anasazi who built Chaco Canyon and who built all the wingmaker stuff down there in Chaco Canyon, and that they then became the Ojibwa because they escaped some tongue of fire from out of the west by the lizard tribe, or it was and this is also, there's whole big underground sections of Los Angeles that you can access from Hill Street, right underneath where the police station is. Obvious, it's like Hill and 6th over there. But the reason Hill is built on a big hill is because you go underground. We did a whole big piece on this on Strange Universe when we started up UPN back in 95, 96, of these underground tunnels that go underneath UCLA and all these other places. So anyway, there was a huge cavern underneath Dulce, and we interviewed 2 engineers who claimed that they'd actually built the Dulce base because it was supposed to store nuclear weapons. And by the way, the storehouse for the nuclear weapons wound up being it's a huge mountain, and it's got a big door on the front of it. That's where we store a bunch of our nuclear missiles. And it's called come on, my brain's not Kirtland Air Force Base. I'm sorry. It's right outside of Albuquerque. There's a big mountain,
Richard
and that's where we
lives over there.
Yeah, somewhere out there near Gallants or somewhere. They claim that they built Dulce as a nuclear waste facility in 1955. And that what happened was the governor of New Mexico said, no thanks, we don't need any nuclear waste, we got enough on our own. And he closed the whole thing down. And then in 1964, when they signed the Sigma Treaty, this information comes from John Lear, by the way, when we signed the Sigma Treaty with the aliens, we gave them the lower levels of Dulce to supposedly do their, genetic little stuff. So Bill Moore says I made the whole thing up, and Bill Moore said the whole thing's a big lie, apparently including driving poor, gentle, fragile Paul Benowitz completely insane. Benowitz claims he had a company in Albuquerque called the Thunder Corporation, and this might be old stuff for people, but the Thunder Corporation was working on anti-gravity. And he claims over his computer, this is kind of pre-internet days and all that he was in contact with an ET that was part of the whole Dulce operation that would feed him information, just enough information, just like 90% of the information. And then the key of like the 10% that would make it all work, suddenly the alien would disappear. Kind of like a lawyer. So they would promise you a bunch of stuff and then just vanish. So Moore made Benowitz's life a living hell, to the point of where Benowitz, I think,
well,
lost
so
his
did
mind.
Doty. It wasn't just Moore, it was also Doty.
Oh yeah, okay, so here comes
Doty
Doty.
has a lot of responsibility on that level.
Here comes Doty in the conversation. All right, so we go out there. It's myself, Fred Bell, Paul Shepard, Joe Randazzo, Dick Kashansky, some Japanese news crew showed up sometime later with a woman named Krista Tilton. Now, Krista I knew very well, and Krista was actually married for a period of time to Wendell Stevens, which a lot of people don't know, because she's the one that helped him write his 30 some odd books of, UFO contact from the Pleiades, UFO contact with the Droga, UFO contact with UMO. All this stuff was bought by the guy that owns the UFO World Congress. Yeah, for like nothing, for nothing. And he met kind of a sad end. So anyway, so we were out there with all these people, and we ultrasounded the Mesa, ran it through 75, I ran all the data that we had through 75 hours of Cray supercomputer time, and out of the University of San Diego, because Jim Delatoso had been one of the developers of the computer and had worked down there as a professor. So we have an image. I mean, I'll show it at some point, but I mean, I've got the image that shows where there's a big dome at the top. There's what appears to be a nuclear pile at the center. The whole thing is resonating 440 hertz, which is like a military generator. But it's all there. There's also a jet tube that goes on the top, a jet tube that comes from the bottom. You can see things are rumbling along. I still remember when we set the first thing up, Delatoso kind of gasped and said, "Oh my God." And we threw the camera on him and said, "What do you got?" And he said, "Well, either all my instruments need to be recalibrated or we're standing on top of New York City." So we put the whole thing together and we physically proved that it was there. I went to MUFON with this information, Walt Andrus, who was running it, which is why I called MUFON the morons ultimately finding out nothing, because they just blew me off and said, well, you're not one of our approved people like Linda Moulton
Well,
Howe or
that's
Stan
because they've
Freeman or
been
whatever.
run by the CIA for all these years.
Exactly. And of course, they didn't want you to know about Dulce. As a matter of fact, one of my godfathers is Harrison Jack Schmidt. And Jack was one of the last men on the moon with my little brother's godfather, Gene Cernan, with Apollo 17. And Jack became U.S. Senator for New Mexico. And I got a call from Jack where Jack said, and you're going to have to, excuse me, let me take a drink here. But Jack said, so I heard you went out to Dulce. I'm like, how did you hear that? And he said, quote, you're going to stay away from that place. You will not, his exact words were, you will not fuck with that place ever again. Because you have no idea the consequences that could come in there. I'll tell your dad, stop it. Just stay away from that as far as you can, because very bad things happen to people that mess with that place. And I was like, okay, Uncle Jack, that's fine. That's all great. So when you have a U.S. Senator telling you to stay away from something, it's pretty wild. All right, so let's move forward ahead a little bit. Krista Tilton, beautiful blonde lady. Her daughter Monica, she claims is an actual ET Palladian hybrid. I mean, I used to walk around with Monica, and we'd see a UFO, and broad daylight UFOs in New Mexico, and Monica would just look up and go, "Oh, that's my dad checking in on me," because her dad's name was like Arion or something, and he was one of the ET guys who supposedly impregnated Krista. Krista claims that she was driving through the New Mexican desert, and she was then that a UFO flew over her car, knocked out the engine in the car. Two alien beings, standard 4 feet tall, black jumpsuits, whole thing, got out, but they had an insignia on their chest. It was a triangular insignia, inverted triangle that had a serpent with two wings on the serpent. And they came in, they managed to unlock her car. They grabbed Krista, they dragged her through the desert, she's kind of a big woman, and they stuffed her in this UFO. Now the UFO was being piloted by a white and a black American pilots who also had these orange jumpsuits on with the same snake, serpent, Quetzalcoatl symbol. And she was then taken into Dulce. Now, inside Dulce, she claims that she saw human beings in glass tubes in a suspended state of animation, and that she was met by a bearded Air Force officer who said, "You'll be fine. Everything will be okay." Calmed her down, but gave her kind of a tour of the place with a big dome in the top. And said they did a physical exam on her. She saw a few things that were kind of weird and kind of interesting. She was given no access beyond the main dome, where she saw, again, human beings still being experimented on. And apparently this bearded Air Force officer was in charge of a lot of this experimentation. Put back in the ship, she woke up back in her car, thinking this whole thing could have been a complete, hallucination. Some years later, she's watching TV in New Mexico, and there was an incident where there was a spaceship-like craft behind a warehouse at Kirtland, and it was being loaded up with supplies by these two guys in orange jumpsuits who appeared to be military, and the MPs caught them and took a couple of shots at the ship, and they returned fire kind of randomly with these kind of green beams or green lasers or whatever. It didn't hurt either of these guys, but it made the news. So there's a bearded Air Force officer that comes on the news with a chyron on the bottom, and says, Richard Doty. And she flips out because she points at the screen and goes, oh my God, that's the guy. That's the guy from Dulce. This is the guy who's explaining away the whole thing as the disinformation officer, I guess, or the information officer for Kirtland Air Force Base, but also working double time.
Well, that implicates him on a different level than most people are familiar with.
Well, that's why it was kind of freaking me out, actually having a conversation with the guy on your show. The Japanese paid for this. They took her up in a helicopter above Dulce. Never been in the air above Dulce before. And she gave us a whole layout of this whole thing. It appeared all over Japanese television, where she goes, oh yeah, that's an entrance there, and there's a road that goes there, and this road goes here. And she said she was apparently looking out the window of this UFO as they were flying over it. She goes, that's where things come and go. And she gave an in-depth, detailed description of everything up on the top of the mountain. Now, we couldn't see that because we didn't have the money to rent a helicopter, but we did go up to the top of the mountain. Now, I don't know, and there's a couple of things that bothered me with Doty, outside of the fact that I just thought he was kind of creepy, and then I was talking to him, but it's he says that it was interesting because I asked him to give me a description of the inside of the base. And he said something about Dulce only having 3 levels. This may be true. He said this, you can go back and listen to the tape. But he said it only had 3 levels. Well,
Oh
when we
yeah,
interviewed
no,
him and Jim.
I mean, that would just, but I mean, he has a job. He works for the government. And
He talked about how Dulce only had 3 levels and there was a dome at the top and whatever. Well, okay, that makes kind of sense because I asked him, are there numbers or colors? In other words, each floor is not number coded, it's color coded. You know why? Because the aliens are colorblind, apparently. And so nobody was allowed past green level 4. And green level, because it went, you had a red level at the top, and then it went, then you had an orange level, then you had a yellow level, then you had green level 4, which was the furthest we were allowed to go. And it went through the chakras to where you had violet level 7, which was down at the bottom, which nobody could go to. But that's where the various experiments and a lot of the genetic research stuff all happened. What triggered the Dulce War was because at the time, Ted Humphrey, again, not his real name, but Ted Humphrey was at the facility. He never commanded it, but he was at the facility. This is where Phil Schneider was one of the mole men, and the mole men were digging this underground tunnel. The underground tunnel system was actually, it was invented by a guy named, a German scientist named Dorsch, that figured out a way to build the tunnels so that they would seal up, so you could then have what Elon Musk is working on now, which is a hyperlink jet tube. So you're traveling in kind of a vacuum, which is what Elon Musk has been talking about building between here and San Francisco. Now Schneider kind of puts himself in the conversation by saying that he got in a fight with them, or he started the war, or he did whatever. Okay, all I know about is that they called up
a whole story that he ended up shooting an alien, and basically
that was a claim. Maybe that's how it worked, but in Sands of Time, all they know is that they got a call from the molemen downstairs, and they said, "You got to come see this." And they went down and they found that the underground tunnel, interesting enough, had petroglyphs on the walls that actually had the Apaches fighting these not only aliens but reptilian, like reptile men. And they found an abattoir of hundreds of thousands of bones, mostly decapitated human bodies. And this is what triggered the final Dulce. The first one was 1977, and it was a disagreement between some security guys who came in with a weapon, and some of the aliens, the whatever you want to call them, kind of flipped out. And so that wound up with 4 guys dying and a couple more guys dying of radiation poisoning after that, because we found out everything below level 4 was so highly toxic and radioactive that we couldn't go down there, which is when we began to suspect that they were up to something more than just genetic research or whatever it is they were doing. And then it triggered the war because the guy who knew all about it was Reagan. And sometime between 84 and 86, Reagan was the one that said, this place has got to go. I want it nuked, or I want it cleaned out, or what have you, which is what triggered the major Dulce conflict. So although it seems to have been given back after that, and then we ultrasounded it in 89, and then the base was evacuated again at some point in January and February of 90. So anyway, I'm just saying that Doty was a guy in charge of this thing. Doty was a disinformation officer there, and all this. It's also when
he was definitely I mean, this is very well known. I see. Somehow you don't know that Camelot dealt with him. We met with him in person in the early days of Camelot, actually.
Right. Okay.
He actually came to my house.
Did you count your fingers in the silverware and everything? No, I was just saying that he's
not
again. It's like having a pet. It's like having
a and Air Force and
all right,
and CIA and
having these guys as friends is like having a pet cobra. You know it's going to bite you eventually.
He was not a friend, but he was a colleague in this field that wanted to talk to us, so he did.
Okay, all right.
Talk to him, so we allowed him to come over and talk with us. And not much came of it. I mean, it didn't really go anywhere. So,
well, I just want to tell you that Chris is the one that identified the place from the top, had been abducted, taken inside, identified Doty.
Well, it's interesting to me that you guys don't know anything about the Mark Richards and his father going into Dulce. So you don't know anything about that.
No, but my involvement was proving that the base existed, which I did. Or a group of us did. I can't take credit for it, but and I think that people that deserve credit should get the credit. I'm really fussy about that, and because my work has been mostly behind the camera, So I've made a lot of other people famous, and nobody ever remembers that.
I know
I've
the
been
feeling.
yeah, you know the feeling. You and I, Carrie, you and I have been the angel wing that has kind of pushed people into the limelight, and everybody
It's
forgets that
okay.
we're the
No,
people
it's
that
all
gave them this
good.
break.
I
All right, so
mean,
1990 rolls along, and I get a job working as a co-director, co-producer on the UFO Contact series. The first person we do is that in 1990, in January, we interview Bob Lazar, which is kind of interesting. Now, I sent you a piece, and this gets us into Area 51. So we interview Lazar. Lazar only worked at Area 51, I think he was there for several months, but he only worked about 16 days out of the period that he was actually physically associated with Area
he
51.
also went to Los Alamos, by the way.
No, he was in that's where the story starts, in Los Alamos. That's where he met the creator of the hydrogen bomb. So, and it was when he met him,
Yeah,
and when he got his card from Dr. Edward Teller. Yeah, he got the business card of Teller, had lunch with Teller,
and
because
we have a witness that worked for Teller, just FYI.
right. And this is where we had to take on guys like Stan Friedman, who
Yeah.
just lied his ass off again, claiming that Bob never
Right.
worked at Los Alamos, and yet George Knapp found him in the directory. He was on the front page of the Los Alamos newspaper. Bob Lazar joins the Jet Age, and it was on the day that paper came out that he just happened to sit next to Edward Teller at a table because everything was, full in the cafeteria, and Teller gave him a card, and it was John Lear. He's the beginning of this whole thing, who said, why don't you call and see if you can get a job at Area 51? And so he called Teller, and Teller said, I'll see what I can do. And a couple of days later is when Bob got the call from EE&G and went in for this weird interview where they asked him about time and space, whatever else.
Anyway, John Lear told us also that actually the way he met Bob Lazar was that he came to work on something in his house.
His wife wanted, the reason Lazar got to go to John's house, I never said that they met through the girlfriend. I said that the reason he was going to his house every couple of days was because his wife wanted flying lessons. And so because Bob already knew him,
also true.
I'd like to teach my wife how to fly. And again, that gave Bob the excuse to go to John's house to have him sign her flight book. And that was where a lot of these stories came from about, I saw my first alien today, I got roughed up by these intelligence guys. So all that came out of John suggesting, yeah, he probably did fix something in his house. Probably, I think what Bob was doing at that time, he was installing security cameras. And I think,
that sounds right.
matter of fact, that was how he got in
That's
trouble.
what he did out at the, the ranch with the girls.
The Bunny Tail Ranch.
Right.
But he only installed the cameras in the parking lot for security for the girls. And he was the first person in Nevada history, I think, in the last 60 years, to actually be prosecuted for pandering. And he got convicted of pandering because he made money from the brothel, even though it was totally legal in Nye County. But they're saying because you made the money in Clark County, where it's illegal.
This is a typical tactic of the deep state.
Sure.
Yeah.
And you know what his punishment was, by the way? He had to do 60 hours of community service teaching science class at a local high school. Anyway, so we interviewed him in 1990. And he then at that point said, look, you don't have to believe anything I say. You go out to this black mailbox, Steve Benlin's mailbox, the 18-mile marker out on Highway 375 on a Wednesday night about dusk, and you'll see UFOs. Now, I've had this big story. I've written it up all over the place where I took a reporter, a friend of mine, Shannon Sands, who was a reporter for the LA Times, and another friend of mine, Jeff, and we got our car swooped by a UFO. We chased after it. We got our faces burned by it. That's why it's funny. This week, on Tucker Carlson, you had Luis Elizondo say, oh yeah, UFOs burn people. Well, I'm one of those people where
hello, Close Encounters of the Third Kind. I mean,
yeah, exactly. That sunburn.
It's just so funny. They're trying to rewrite history right now. And
thank you. Yes. Thank you. And
so we are going to be here to correct the record and make sure that these people don't lie through their teeth. Okay. So that's important.
Oh, you can say the F word. It's your show. It's okay. Go ahead.
No, I want to. I know your tender ears.
I know. I'm just good little Catholic boy. Point of exactly what you're talking about. So we all go out there. I mean, I went to the doctor. I was sick as a pig for months, And the doctor said, what'd you do? You have radiation poisoning. And what'd you do? Stick your head in the microwave? Because I was all burned, from underneath my hat.
Incredible.
And my friend Jeff was sick, and we were like, it was so weird because I had like this fever of like 104,
Wow.
and or I'd be freezing cold, and the whole room around me would heat up. So I had fans on. It was a very strange thing. So, and my buddy Jeff got sick too, and all that. So this is where it got weird. So I need to give credit where credit is due. The people that were going out there before me, who started in about Christmas of 1990, were Gary Schultz, who took one of the most famous photos, close-up photos of one of the ships directly over the Bald Mountain Range, which I mailed to Popular Science, because they had a guy named Stuart Brown who was dissing us, who was telling us this is all military technology, you guys are all nuts, except, and there was this massive disinformation campaign where they never wanted to show what we saw and what we proved. Even when Linda called me, and she'd managed to pitch the show Sightings at Paramount. And Linda said, I need your help putting this thing together. So I produced the Area 51 piece where I put all the, George Knapp and Bob Lazar, put all these people together. I had all their numbers. So once again, I'm behind the scenes working this. So Linda comes out with us, and, we're out there at the mailbox and all this, and they've got cameras set up, and there's a ship that comes up and starts zipping around. And the camera guys won't turn the cameras around and won't take pictures of the UFO. The same thing happened with the LA Times, where this ship that had just buzzed us was bouncing around in the desert. 60 people are witnessing it, and I can't get the LA Times reporter to take a photo. And he says, I was told to take pictures of UFOs, not to take people watching UFOs, not to take pictures of UFOs. and he said, and I've got a Hasselblad portrait camera that only has a range of 12 feet. So, and it's raining.
Well,
raining,
the bottom line being, of course, they're working for media. So they were told, if you see anything strange, don't photograph it.
Thank you. And the same thing happened with Sightings. I'm like, you got to be kidding me. We're doing a 2-hour special for Fox. There's a UFO flying around out there, and you're telling me you're not going to turn the cameras around? And they both just sat here and they said, it's not worth our jobs, man. And I'm screaming at them. I don't know what Linda was doing at the time, but it was just kind of funny. All right. So this is the progression of this now. And I've got to bring Jim Goodall into this conversation, because I don't know what he was talking about when he was on the show. It was Gary Schultz, Anthony Hilder, Norio Hayakawa. Those are the big guys.
Anthony Hilder is a legend.
The way we took people out there, I personally took people like Conan O'Brien. I took Dean Devlin. I took the whole staff of The Simpsons, because Conan was the head writer for The Simpsons at the time. We'd rent a bus. We'd go out there. G. Edward Griffin, who wrote Fearful Master. And, I'd known him since I was 10. So, because he was a friend of the family, and he was out there with us and, saw the whole thing. Now, in May of 1990, we started getting closer and closer to the line of the base. And we found this little campsite, which we all put together, put the rocks in and the whole thing, but we called it Campfire Hill. And then everybody would go out there and, camp on this little hill, because it was just before a dip where you came in onto the base. So it was actually May 29th of 91. And we were sleeping at the campsite, and I finally just left my girlfriend Eunice in the tent. Actually, that morning we got buzzed by a helicopter, and the helicopter came right in, practically came in the front of the tent, and I flipped out because I thought the guy was pointing a machine gun at us, and it turned out it was a camera with a big long lens on it. But the guy's hanging out the gunner bay, pointing this what looked like a weapon at us, and almost blows the tent over while we're there. So my girlfriend goes back to sleep, Eunice goes back to sleep. And I said, I wonder what's at the top of that mountain. So this was actually May 30th of 1991. And I went and climbed up the mountain, got to the top, and went, holy crap, I can see their house from here. And I can see the entire base. Now, as far as I know, I'm the first one that's ever been up that mountain. And at the same time, I'm at the top of the mountain, and the Whack and Hut guys had pulled in. This was the weirdest interaction I've ever had with these guys, because usually when you go up to them, they run away. They tore the car apart. They literally broke into my girlfriend's car, tore the car to pieces. And then when I got back down, I found out that they'd stolen my wallet, oddly enough. So when I found out my wallet was gone, I said to Eunice, I said, we've got to get out of here, because I had a Nevada driver's license at the time. And I said, we got to get back to Vegas so I can actually have my license renewed, because they hand it to you right there in Vegas. And, but these Whack and Hut guys were surrounding us. I mean, there was like 6 trucks all around us. They wanted us out of there bad. So long story short, we jump in the car, we go back down to Vegas. I go to the DMV, I get my driver's license, and suddenly we're trapped at the DMV because this massive storm came up, and it was literally, we're listening on the radio, and it says a huge dust storm coming out of the mysterious area 50, and then the whole city of Vegas went black, and all the lights went down, all the radio went down, the whole thing. We were completely freaking out at this entire deal. I looked in the newspaper the next day, but there was a photo of it in the LA Times, and it showed this ginormous dust hurricane. I don't know what even to call it, but it was epicentered right at Area 51, which means that something was landing or something was happening, and there was a reason why they wanted us out of there.
Right.
Now I'm flipped out. Now I'm like, okay, so I got my friend. Video cameras were not, didn't have a lot of them around at that time. They were pretty expensive. So I got my friend Fred Isles, and Fred and I went up, I think it was the next week or so. We went out June, I think it was June 10th or something. People have seen this footage all over the world, by the way. It's been stolen. It's been pirated. It says it has the date on the bottom. And what it is that in the fog, we're filming, we're up there freezing our asses off. We're at the top of the hill. We're filming the whole thing. And there's a big light that comes on, and the light comes on, it comes all the way down. We're all excited about it at first. And then when it comes down, all of the lights at Hangar 18 come on. And at the end of the tape, we just go, oh, it's just a plane. Okay, well, that was exciting. And, but that's when we went up there and we filmed it for the first time. Now, Mr. Goodall claims that he was up there with John Lear in 1989. And I'm sorry, that's not true. Nobody heard of Jim Goodall. Nobody heard of Jim Goodall until at least 92. And if he wants to prove me wrong, I will apologize. But he's a photographer, right? Does he have a picture of himself up there? Did he photograph himself with John Lear? Because he was
a pilot. He's a famous pilot.
Again, he was nowhere near that place or that peak, which he claims he took John Lear up on in 1989. It's just not true. And the reason, hold on, the reason why I took John up on his birthday on December 6th, and John said, "Why aren't you dead? I've never been up here before. This is amazing." Because I literally like strapped John on my back because of his legs to get him up there as a present, as a gift.
Someone said it wasn't physically possible for you to do that.
Well, okay, fine. They can say whatever it is they want, but I had a rope around me, and I had him with a rope as well, and I'm pulling him. I mean, he's not physically on my back like a backpack, but I had rope around him, that was around his waist, with me pulling on the rope, literally, with him over my back, or with the rope over my back.
John isn't here to say yay or nay.
What? Oh,
John.
Okay. All right. That's fine. I'm just saying.
I believe you. I don't have a problem.
The reason when John went up there on December 6th, he told everybody. I mean, I kept this a secret. Let me, because this goes on to the next thing. This goes on to how the Sands of Dime documents came out, how all this other stuff happened. Okay. So when I took John up there, I knew that he was going to tell everybody, because I kept the place a secret for a reason. And the reason I kept it a secret is because I interviewed other people who claimed that they had worked at the facility. And I would say, fine, show me what it looks like, because I'm the only one that had seen it. As far as I know, I'm the only one that had seen it. Now, John had a bunch of pictures of the base before 1987, because you used to just be able to walk over Low Hill and stand. They were literally posts with a chain that was connecting the posts, not a fence, just a chain. And you could stand at that chain. Then in 87 was when they took the 89,000 acres. That's when they built the S4 facility, totally different from S2. Here's the other thing about Richard Doty. Doty kept trying to claim something about only he knows about S2. I'm sorry, they're in my books. They're all through the books, because the S4 facility was kind of a temporary deal that they bought to house the 9 ships. And by the way, Bob Lazar never saw an actual alien craft. They handed him an alien reproduction vehicle with all the things. So, because I asked Ted Humphrey about this, and I sent you the quote to post on your website, whether or not you posted it or not, I don't know, saying Bob Lazar never came close to one of the actual alien vehicles. What we did is we gave him an ARV to tear apart to see if that vehicle crashed, if anybody could figure out how that ship worked, and they couldn't. So he said in the 16 some odd days,
since you weren't even with him when he was working there for however long it was, 2 weeks, 1 week, whatever, you can't say that with certainty.
Okay, fine. The thing I sent you was from the guy that used to run the place.
I know.
And I said, what about Bob Lazar? What about Bob Lazar?
Okay, but that's, I mean, it's not a big deal, really. It's fine. I'm just saying that, your guy, Ted Humphreys, that you both based your books, and this is really supposed to be about your books. So right. I don't know if people quite are making the link up. They have to understand that this story, in a sense, this part of the story isn't really in the book, right?
Ted said, why don't we test him on the public side of the valley We'll do a controlled leak of information to make it look like they're in control, that we've got ships that we're testing, you know,
Right, right.
Lazar. And
But
again,
he's still work, you know, he's
when
still government. They, you know, if they lie
I
on
know,
their
I
choice.
know. Well, this is kind of a last will and testament kind of, you know, it was all given to me
I understand.
right before he disappeared.
Before
So
he
there was
time traveled out.
we don't know that. I'm not going to say that. So okay,
Well, all
let's get into
indicators
the
are that he did,
let's get into
but
the
yeah.
programs that are out there. As I was saying, if Mr. Goodall has any proof that he was there before 1991, because nobody heard of him after
Okay.
91, 92, Project Galileo was the actual reverse engineering of the ships. It probably took place at level 2, level 3. Lazar, according to Ted Humphrey, never had access to anywhere below level 2. That he had a workbench. He had a very crude oscilloscope of some kind. He never saw an actual ship. He saw an ARV, an alien reproduction vehicle. Now, the other testing that was going on, the primary reason they were interested in the ships was because they had the ability to dilate time. So when you went up in the ship, you could spend 30 seconds or a minute or 5 minutes in a ship. You'd come back down and 24 hours would have passed on the outside, which is just the way the relative dimensions in space actually work. So they took a ship up for a test drive and they thought that they were flying around downtown Vegas, only to discover that they wound up over Los Angeles and were causing this giant flap. And they wound up being over the ocean going, well, wait a minute, this is wrong, because they traveled so fast. They didn't realize they were going so fast because you're at the center of the time stream. So there is Project Galileo. Galileo was the actual reverse engineering of the alien ships. Now, Project Red Light was more interesting because we have more proof of that. I went up there with the Japanese, and the Japanese they paid me a bunch of money to get a bunch of information. They were crazy over this stuff. So when you come to the edge of the Tikaboo Valley, there's a mountain range. You have to come over the hill. You've been there, obviously. You have to come over the hill. So we hid up at the top of the ridge before you went down into the valley. We didn't go to Campfire Hill. We didn't go up well, eventually went up Whitesides. So we're hiding in a van up there. And we had a interceptor. We had a radio, like a ham radio or whatever it was. And we could intercept the actual communications of the guards. So a truck comes out way at the other side of the valley. It was about 17, 20 miles away. Truck comes out with its headlights. We can see it. We're looking at it through binoculars. We tune in the scanner, I guess you could call it. And this one of the guards there said, 4317, Roger, all clear, Roger, Project Red Light commence, Roger. Truck turns around, goes back in there. The Japanese go, oh, we want to get a closer look. So we all pile back into this van. And as we're coming down the hill, I hear this, all the Japanese are freaking out. And we look up through like the sunroof of the van, and there's a ship right over us. And it's this big red glowing thing that's zipping all around. So we screech the van to a halt. We pull over to the side. And this was some interesting and rather famous footage. They get out and they point the camera at it, and the thing's going, it's making these loop-to-loop kind of things. And then within a 20th of a second, the ship goes boop, and it disappears. And as I said, between frames of the video, not that there's frames of the video, but within a 20th of a second, the thing reappears in another part of the sky, but it's all in the same frame. So the thing goes boop here and then goes boop here. Now, Lazar's explanation for that is supposedly you're actually turning on all 3 gravity amplifiers at the base of the ship. And then they actually take a point in space and they bend the point in space to where the ship is. Then they turn off the gravity amplifiers, and then space goes and it snaps back to its original size and shape, and you're at the place where you want to go. So there was that. Now, there was S4 and there's also S2. S2 is, and here's the other interesting thing, is that everybody talks about the TR-3B. There's the SR-71 Blackbird, the SR, which is what Goodall's expertise is in, basically. All he wants to talk about is the Blackbird, because that was actually developed at 5.1, not over at S2 and not over at S4. So S4, which George Knapp says has now been destroyed. The whole place has been dismantled, maybe. But George is he's the only good thing left on Coast to Coast. It's only Sunday nights is the only nights standable. Over at S2, and I think that it's S2. Now you can go on Google Earth and you can actually see the square building that is what S2 is, because S4 was built into the side of a mountain. And now you see on Google Earth what looks like a big building, which they're referring to as S4, which is not. So as we move forward here, SR stands for surveillance and reconnaissance. And the SR-71 flew, it was classified until 74, but it was going at between Mach 3 I mean, Mach 3, some people said it went as fast as Mach 5. So then it was declassified in 74. And then in 1978, the whole program was completely scrapped. And the Air Force was trying to tell you that there was nothing to replace it. Well, what they had to replace it was the TR programs. The TR stands for terrestrial reconnaissance. And everybody makes a big fuss over the TR3A. Well, they're way beyond that now. Now they're up to the terrestrial reconnaissance like 8, 9, and 10. And this is the big one that you saw in France. There's a big triangle, and it actually has the quantum bubble in the
How
center.
did you not realize that?
Because it's explained in book 3 as to exactly how these things work. And and this was stuff that, remember, that video was taken in 2006 in Paris. And so, I asked about it, and he goes, well, it takes 8 guys to fly it, and there's a quantum field at the center, and the quantum field goes bloop, bloop, and it encases the entire ship. Because if you're going to travel through time space and actually have organic material like human beings in space-time, you have to create a bubble. Because when you're traveling through time space, what it does, and this is what we learned with Fred Bell and why he got so messed up, is because you're moving through the astral plane for a period, and there's a lot of really creepy stuff that lives in the astral plane. And this is why people come back with all this goo, what do they call it? Ectoplasm. They come up covered with ectoplasm. But when you travel in time, and this is why we did all these experiments early on in the 60s, where they could teleport all kinds of stuff except human beings. You could port anything inorganic, you could teleport. Anything organic, the problem was that it took it out from the outside in, but then it put you back from the inside out. So it's like literally being turned inside out, because the human body has a seven chakra energy system, right? We agreed on that one?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Okay. But those seven,
more than that, but yeah.
Okay. That's what I was about to say. The 7 chakra energy system, each chakra has 7 chakras that actually go outward. So we literally have a very delicate, intricate system of 49 chakras, 7 times 7, because what happens is you start way out here at the causal field, which is where God exists, out here somewhere. Then it goes from the causal field to the astral field, to the spiritual field. I'm sorry, causal field, etheric field, astral field, spiritual field, emotional field, mental field, physical field. So it goes in these layers. So what happens is when you're talking about traveling through time, it grabs you from the etheric where God lives here and goes and sort of sucks you out that way. But when it puts you back, you come in from the inside out. It puts you back inside out. So when we did the time machine with Uncle Fred, and I had to climb up a pole to actually hook this thing into the power of the city, we blacked out Laguna Beach for the better part of a day. And I threw the switch on this thing, and the whole thing went from the outside, it disappeared. It like particleized like a teleport beam. And then about 3-4 minutes later, the whole thing started from the middle and went zoom, had this big kind of bamp sound as it displaced the air. Okay.
So Bob, I think he's called Bob Beckwith.
Yeah, I know. I know him. He was there. He was around. Okay. Yeah, he was doing stuff with Fred at that time.
I just did an interview with a guy who met him and knew him well, and he told him all about his exposure in the Philadelphia experiment.
Fred Bell or Bob Beckwith? Who are you talking about?
Bob Beckwith.
Oh, okay. All right. I do.
He had stories about that. I don't know the details, so I'm just saying. I was just curious if you knew him. That's all.
Knew of him. The thing with Fred is that when I pulled him out of this thing and he's all bloody, he's bleeding from his eyes and his ears and his nose, and I get him across the porch and I throw him into the bed that had this big pyramid all over it with a pyramid baffle and the whole thing on the top. And I'm like, I'm going to call 911. I'm going to call, I got to get you to the hospital. And Fred's like, no. He goes, come here. And he grabs me by the shirt and he pulls me in and he goes, Sean, the future, it's not there. The future's not there. I was like, just be okay. Let me get you some aspirin or something. And according to him, again, and this goes all the way back to George Van Tassel and whatever else, but according to him, when Fred jumped there, because he was vibrating at this particular frequency in space-time, when you move into the future, he said that the future looked like a giant construct. He said it was like if you have a video game that doesn't render properly and all you see is the outline of the game. He said it was like being an ant that was like marching through a blueprint of some kind. And he says that literally the future doesn't exist until we get there and interact with it, which goes all the way back to the Buddhist maxim that an apple's not an apple until you perceive it to be as such. So the whole thing then has to do with frequency, which was George Van Tassel's equation again, which was F equals 1 over T, which is frequency 1 over time. And, the way this thing works now, and again, as far as time travel goes, therefore, we needed a device which was actually developed in World War II by a guy named Hans Kohler, and it's called the Kohler device. And the Kohler device is literally it's like a perpetual energy machine. If they built bigger ones, you could power the entire Earth with these little devices. And they built a miniature one of these that then creates this bubble around you, exactly like in Terminator, where Arnold Schwarzenegger comes to Griffith Park, naked, give me your clothes. And,
Right.
he's inside the bubble. That bubble is necessary to keep you from being turned inside out. And that's how we began to figure out how to actually use not so much time travel, but the ability to, say, jump from here to the edge of the galaxy or someplace else in time and space. And when you get to the actual time travel part, it's so funny because I heard, I talked to this at length with Wano Savin. I know you've told everybody who he was, but I promised I wouldn't. And he used one of my metaphors saying that time is like a stream or a river and that it's one dimension. And then in order to travel in the dimension, you have to jump up on the shore and then you run up the stream and then you jump into the stream. And then you have to match the flow of the stream in order to get down, row your boat gently down the stream. Otherwise, if you just stand in time, that time has a tendency to build up around you. But it points us to the point, this is where Looking Glass comes in, points us to the point of where time as we know it is a form of mass consciousness. And that mass consciousness agrees on a higher level that certain events are going to occur a certain way. And so when you look at waves that are coming towards the ocean of time, as opposed to the river, when you look at a wave coming towards the shore, you can run down and toss yourself into the wave. And all it does is create like a little hole in the wave, and the wave fills itself back up and still hits the shore. But if you want to stop that wave, you have to come up with an equal and opposite wave. So this is where radio and where your show and where when we built Coast to Coast up into 26.5 million people all receiving information late at night. And it's why Art was telling me, well, maybe I don't want you to make predictions anymore on the show. And I was like, why? He says, because your predictions have been so accurate that I'm afraid that we're creating this thing. We're creating this thing in people's minds that they're making the predictions come true. And I said, well, but you have Ed Dames on your show every other week predicting the end of the world. And his exact words were, come on, Sean, everybody knows that Ed's full of shit. And he says, but when I have you on, you frighten me because when you say something, it happens. All right, so now let's go to the next phase because that was whatever else, but let's go to Project Looking Glass. What Looking Glass was, and this is according to Bob Lazar, this is according to Ted Humphrey and the Sands of Time books and all that other stuff. The aliens had a device. And once again, we were dealing with a number of different groups that were moving back and forth through it. But the device was it was a time viewing device. In other words, we could see any event we wanted to focus this Looking Glass thing to. So if you wanted to watch the crucifixion of Christ, if you wanted to watch Caesar crossing the Rubicon, if you wanted to watch Alexander the Great in a battle, you could do all this stuff. And it had to do with it interacted with thought, and you could then act with the thought, and then you could actually get an image, like a holographic image, and you could view time. Had nothing to do with viewing the future, not ever. Now, what we used to do at USC, because what they're talking about, I think what these Looking Glass people are talking about now, maybe, or they're just making it all up and it's just a big hoax, is I guess what you could call predictive political science. When I was at USC and I got my degree in poli-sci, we used to have this giant computer, this huge computer, took up a whole building. And we would go in and we had to program the computer with punch cards. We literally had to have a question, put the question, you had to actually program the punch cards, put the punch cards in the computer. But it was pretty easy stuff. It was predictive poli-sci because you would form a society. Now you can do it with stuff like Fortnite or what's the Sims or what have you. And it was all about, how you would shape society using basically a carrot and a stick, using basically punishments and rewards. That humanity is kind of a big amoeba. And if you poke the amoeba with a stick, the amoeba goes in the opposite direction. So it's pretty interesting if you have an artificial intelligence computer. And again, if you're talking about quantum AI, you're talking about actually storing information in another dimension. That's what quantum artificial intelligence is. So if you have AI that's kind of running everything, they can do the same thing with predictive political science. And let's say if you tax people to death in California, this is easy political science. I can predict some years ago that we're going to tax people, we're going to open up the border, we're going to make drugs legal and free, we're going to dose people with fentanyl, we're going to let them crap in the streets in San Francisco, then maybe they're going to move to Florida, someplace free. So there's predictive political science for it. So if these guys are using AI as predictive political science, and they do come up with the April 18th date, I think it's pretty impressive that right now we are literally riding a tiger where we've picked a fight with a nuclear superpower over the Ukraine, over an area of Ukraine that's still legally part of Russia, where Ukraine has not declared its independence as a country, where the Donetsk area is still ethnically Russian, that was being terrorized by these actual Nazis, not neo-Nazis, actual freaking Nazis that were taking people out. And it's kind of confusing for me, since Vladimir Putin so far in his career has done nothing but try to ameliorate global conflict. He literally got us out of a war with Syria, which Clinton and Obama wanted desperately. And Putin is the one that came and pooped in their ice cream and said, no, these sarin gas bombs belong to the rebels. They don't belong to Assad. He moved in there to protect Christianity because he didn't want the Muslims to take over and murder over 100,000 Christians. He did the same thing with the United States and Israel attacked Georgia, where he was the one that just defended Georgia, just drove them out, could have taken the entire area, and he didn't. Had a big fight with George Bush at the 2008 Olympics where he's yelling at Bush, who's drunk off his ass watching women's volleyball. So far, he moved all of his short-range weapons out of Eastern Europe, and the United States moved in with more short-range weapons. And he said, George Bush is like a man cutting everybody with a razor. Every time I try to make peace, the United States counters me with some awful act of war. So just saying that it's kind of interesting about what's happening there with the and by the way, the bomb that just went off in the train station, they took pictures of it and it said it actually came from the Ukraine. So I'm not going to,
isn't that convenient?
Yeah, isn't that convenient? So I'm not going to weigh in on this one way or another, but Looking Glass.
Okay, wait, this is from our Dan Burish interview, and this is a drawing they gave us of Project Looking Glass at the time. Doesn't mean it looks like that,
right?
But this is what they gave us at the time.
Okay, I have no idea but again, okay, what would that do? If you and I, every night when you and I walk outside, you look up in the sky and you're looking into the past by tens of thousands, if not millions of years. So there's that. Now, if you and I teleported 10,000 light years out into space and then had a really good telescope and then looked back at Earth, what would we see? We would see Earth as it was 10,000 years ago. Why? Because light and sound never die. So if you have a device like this, is this or is this not a device that focuses on a point in time space that then turns around and looks back into time? But what I'm saying is, as far as I know, the Looking Glass at Area 51 had absolutely nothing to do with seeing the future. It had to do with actually presenting events back in time. So that's as far as now. And how would you have it?
Burish, and back in the day, right, they said that it was looking into the future to see probabilities, and that it was connected to a kind of computer that would then read out the probabilities and all of that. And there's also the yellow book. So a lot of people get confused between the two of them, and there are a lot of other things. There's also this thing called the chronovisor,
the chronovisor, and again, Carrie
Bashago claims that he was involved with. I mean, there's been lots of so-called time travel devices looking into the future and the past, and you also don't know that any of these people can, at any juncture, they can be lying about certain details, right? They're motivated to lie about certain details.
Are just crazy. Andrew Basajo should have been.
He said he was Stargate. The TV show Stargate was accurate. That they actually had a device like that.
Yeah, I agree.
Right now, a kind of a Stargate that you go through.
Yep. That I agree with. Andrew Basago told me to my face that he was going to be president of the United States in 2016.
Well, I don't agree with a lot of. We did a show with him, a TV show.
Yeah, I know. I know.
We're not. I did not necessarily agree with a lot of his stuff. In fact, I did some investigation on someone he worked with, and so on, and it's quite fascinating.
Probably said
there are elements of overlay, what we call mind control, people being brought in thinking they have, getting implanted memories, things like that. I'm not saying one way or the other about Andy. He has, maybe he was looking at a different timeline. He claims he met Obama back in the day at UCLA or wherever it was, and that he knew he was going to be president.
There were a lot of people that actually said that he was being groomed for that. He went to Occidental, by the way. And the reason Obama went to Occidental is because Occidental is a gateway for foreign students to get into this country. And because his passport was Indonesian, he came here with his gay Muslim boyfriend and was at Occidental. By the way, they subpoenaed the records from Occidental to get his college records from Occidental and were denied by a federal judge. So Obama's going to put together his library, and it's all going to be probably sponsored by Adobe Photoshop, and the whole thing is going to be smoke and mirrors because you can't prove anything about the guy's past. Nothing. You can't get his transfers from Columbia. There's no photos of him at Columbia.
You can't prove that he's the reincarnation of King Tut either.
Okay, well, I'm just saying. I don't think we have a dossier that talks about King Tut or whomever. So anyway, so there's Looking Glass. There's Project Foresight. Now the one other thing that I did, which had to do with time viewing and whatever else, but and of course, well, now this is interesting. This is something that both you and I were involved with, so let's talk about that briefly. You and I, sometime back, about it's 20 years ago. This is 98, 99, but we were both involved with the Wingmakers, right? The Wingmaker project. And we were talking to these guys about making a movie about them, and it was fascinating.
A long time.
Fascinating thing. I know this is 98, 99, honey. This is way back. We go back to 95, I think. So wow. Long time. We danced, we had dinner, we fell in love. It was wonderful.
No, we toured Europe.
Yeah, we toured Europe together. That was good fun. So we're involved with the Wingmakers, and in the Wingmakers material, if you remember, they had a device that was and I think this is the best way if you wanted to do remote viewing or time travel or whatever. This device was a laptop computer. It came in kind of a big suitcase, and this laptop computer actually connected to the frontal lobes of a remote viewer. And so it was like a neural net where you could actually begin to see things that the viewer was thinking about in their mind. Now, oddly enough, the old TV show House MD actually did an entire episode about this, where there was a girl who was in a coma and they put these things on her head and they managed to get an image of the last thing that she saw.
There's other movies.
Well, they could actually do this in real time, where there was a viewer named Samantha actually in the script, in the a lower level person in the AFL-CIO, which is the Advanced Contact Intelligence Organization, who, by the way, not only was everything in the Wingmaker material accurate, I met somebody that knew Jameson Neruda in New York, who was a Mesoamerican expert who had literally 2 skeletons inside the Natural History Museum, knew him personally. Then we researched a bunch of stuff. Matter of fact, I talked about it on the radio on Coast to Coast about how they were connected. An organization called Omnigon was actually working on the internet. This was 98, mind you. And in the Wingmaker stuff, they said, look, the internet is going to get immensely powerful because they're going to use a form of alien mathematics and alien algorithms. This is 98, mind you. And they said that everything's going to go to the streaming thing. They predicted a lot of this stuff. So when I talked about their company, I got threatened by their lawyers. They wrote me a letter, which I showed you, and I think you posted on your website, that said, how dare you talk about us on the radio? How did you get this information? I said, well, I called you up on the phone and said I was interested in investing in your company, and you sent me a prospectus. And the prospectus was like Spook Central. Every single person in the prospectus was CIA, NSA, DIA, every branch of the government you can think of. The woman I spoke to, whose name was Elaine Gifford, I think it was, but she was the former foreign communications director for the CIA, and she was working for this company now. And I said, how do I buy stock in your company? And she goes, well, you have to buy like 100,000 shares, and it's a lot of money, but I'll send you prospectus. Now, by the way, out of this company, it was Omnigon and another company named Gene Tech, and all the stuff we're talking about genetics and about all this other stuff, and the hyperfast internet and all that, all came out of this company. I've mentioned this story before on about Dulce. One last thing. In 1977, and this was apparently right before the first Dulce conflict, where 4 guys were killed. And by the way, sense of time again, if you go to strangeuniverseradio.com, the website's up. Everybody can order the books now. We've got books 1, 2, and 3 all ready to go. Sands of Time book 4 will be all ready in about 10 days. But once you order it now, it's all there. Also, one other thing on the website to give it a plug is that if we've got the some meditation CDs, we've got some stuff with the sound of the Palladium beam ships mixed with the sound of Earth at the 432 hertz. So they're all there. The God Force meditation, it's not a CD, but you can download it and then use it on your using your iPad or your phone or whatever. But everything's up there. And the 2 books, Black Seraph and Veil of the Antichrist, those will be back up in a couple of weeks as well. So it's all there. We finally got everything up. Thanks to your show, it lit a fire under us to say, let's get everything up and we'll see what's happening. And on the 18th, if we're not all destroyed by a nuclear bomb, like they say, I'm actually starting a radio show again on Revolution Radio, but it starts on
I think our taxes are due that day, so there's a good
taxes
reason why
taxes are due.
They're not going to nuke New York in the meantime.
And it's also Resurrection Day, so I figured, you know, it's kind of like me getting resurrected from the dead. Let my people go. So it'll be a lot of fun, and I think we're going to get a whole network, and we're going to get a lot of people like Vanessa Victorious and Charlie Miller and you know, Ryan Velli out of Canada, Kevin Shaw. So we're going to put a whole bunch of really interesting people together on this new network. And by the way, now that the boss is gone, which you and I both had conflicts with, it might actually be kind of a pleasant place to work. So, because I know you and I were both on there, and
so they won't rip off your guests and call your guests up on the phone, try to bring them on as their guest, and do all kind of crazy shit.
Yeah, I know. It's everybody, not getting paid. So, but let me put the Wingmaker thing in there, is that this was a form of time travel, if you will, where you projected the target into the future, and you could film what was going on in the person's head, and they could then interact with it. I mean, I thought that was a really interesting, innovative way to do this. But everything the Wingmaker information told us, from the corporations, from the companies, I actually found where their headquarters was out in the desert, because I knew a friend of mine that was a federal fireman. And he said, the only place we can't go is this weather complex that you're talking about out by Palm Springs, which was the headquarters of the ACIO.
That interviewed James, you know.
What? Where'd you put that?
It's all in writing, though. He would only do it in writing interview, but it's on. I believe it's still on my website.
All right. So you never actually met him in
years
person
ago, and
you never met him in person. He just gave you written responses.
Right.
Okay. All right.
I couldn't see him on camera or anything like that. So
yeah,
he wouldn't, because he was in hiding. He was in hiding.
My question about that whole thing is, how does he hide after revealing all the stuff that he did? But it's really a shame we didn't move forward with the movie with that, because it was pretty cool. So, all right. So here's the thing. When you're talking about predictive remote viewing, you're talking about whatever, and this is my personal experience. So I had a friend named Star Fuentes, very famous healer, lives down in Arkansas, teaches mystical classes, wonderful, wonderful person. And she called me up and said, how would you like to do remote viewing for the military? And I was like, well, I specifically developed my remote viewing protocols, my spiritual remote viewing, because I saw that the military was taking something that was the most powerful thing ever, which is the ability to sort of transcend time and space and time travel using the human mind. I mean, with the proper in training, I guess, or in entrancement. I mean, I could take anybody anywhere in time and space, wherever, because it's all here. It's all in the right-hand side of the brain. All time and all space is there. You want to talk to anybody, you want to experience anything, it's all a question of going back to that point. So I said, okay, well, again, the military is not an altruistic charitable organization. It's usually used to kill people. And I think that's why guys like Ed Dames and David Morehouse eventually went insane, because they were using military protocols that are used to kill people, and I was just using it to, you know, win money at roulette.
Well,
and
saying
teach
they went
people how to do
insane
that
is maybe a little over the top.
Okay, not when you know them like I do. Not when not when you've had people's girlfriends calling you in the middle of the night saying they've just been beaten up and almost killed because the guy's gone insane. Stretches the rubber band a bit too tight, as we say. So, and I've managed to maintain my sanity through, you know, everything from getting beaten up to
pretty much in
long periods of solitary confinement and stage 4 cancer and all the stuff I've been through in the last couple of years, courtesy of our friends in the federal government, the Bureau of Prisons, and the Department of Injustice. So it's kind of like, it's sort of like destiny is all. And it's like, there is a butterfly effect when it comes to traveling or moving through time, but it's not the butterfly effect that you think. The butterfly effect, most people look at the butterfly effect that, let's say you go back to the past, you go back to the day of the dinosaurs, and you step on a butterfly. And then suddenly you come back and, you know, you're in a cage at a zoo and the whole earth has been taken over by, you know, humanoid reptilians or something, that mankind doesn't evolve because you piss off a monkey or take away its banana or something. So in this case, you have 2 points in time. You have point A and point B in time. And let's say you have a butterfly that flies between these 2 points in time. And the butterfly will make that journey 10,000 times. But in between, the butterfly will go up here, it'll go down here, it'll catch a wind, it'll do whatever. So it makes the journey. There's always destiny where it gets to the point where you want it to go. But predicting the things that are in between point A and point B is a butterfly effect. Oh, there's your lovely dog. I'm gonna get a dog just like that, just like your dog. So tell her to say hi. So the butterfly effect is it's very difficult to predict the things that are occurring in between. And right now we're in a very interesting space of in between. When we first started doing remote viewing, I was in a Psych 101 class at Stanford, and the SRI guys came in. I think it was Russell Targ and it was Hal Putoff or Ingo Swan or what were these guys at SRI. They came in and basically said, you want to play a game? We're like, okay. So they gave us these remote viewing protocols, if you will, which took us a day to learn. And then we took 2 kids out of the class. I'm just telling you the short story. 2 kids out of the class that were not part of this. And they said, where are these kids going to be on Friday, standing on campus someplace? Now you have to remember, Stanford's ginormous. It's hundreds and hundreds of acres. They call it the farm for a reason, because it's like miles between classes. If you have to ride your bike, I know. So they said, where are these kids going to be at 2 p.m. on Friday? So we kicked 2 kids out of the class. We did a whole big thing. And this is where I kind of learned how to use map dowsing, because I took out a pendulum, which I'd been using for years, thanks to my Irish grandma. And I scanned the whole place. And I said, okay, we finally predicted amongst the class that they would be standing in front of the fountain in the quad, looking south at the Hoover Tower. And so we marked the place on the map, and we drew what it was they were looking at. So we put it in an envelope, give it to them. So on Friday, they push them out of a car like 9 o'clock, and they used a twister spinner. And they would just spin the dial on the spinner every 15 minutes and just randomly walk in that direction. You know, this is not high-tech stuff. But at 2 p.m., they were standing right in front of the fountain, looking up at the Hoover Tower. They opened up the envelope, and there they are. Had them on the map, had what they were looking at, had just drew the whole thing. Now the military applications for that are amazing. Where is Saddam Hussein? Where is the kidnapped victim? Where is the child? Where's my cat that got loose or whatever?
Where's Biden? He doesn't exist. He's not really human.
Right? Yeah, and he just got pooped on by a bird in Iowa. Good for a Republican bird. So I get a call from these military guys. Once again, it was another woman named Elaine for some reason, and this is Colonel Elaine. And at first they were giving me blind targets, 7583 gamma, 2874 aqua, et cetera, et cetera. And they had me viewing viruses. So it was weird because I'm drawing weird, abstract shapes and stuff that looked like coronavirus and things like that. And after a couple dozen viewings of those, they said, well, we have a group of viewers, but we want to tell you that you've been the most accurate. You're the one we kind of trust. And then they started giving me other coordinates, and I started seeing desert landscapes. I started seeing mountains and rocks and, dirt, looked like a giant cat box kind of. And I finally, now remember, this was December of 2001, so 9/11 had just happened. And I finally just took the not so giant Sherlock Holmesian leap of, oh, well, you guys are looking for bin Laden, aren't you? And they said, well, we don't want to front load you with any information. We don't want you to go into AOL, which is analytic overlay, or do what we call peacocking or whatever. So I was like, well, you guys are pretty obvious. You're looking for bin Laden. And they were like, well, we're not going to say anything up front. So they gave me these coordinates. And I said, and I used my pendulum, and I got out this map of Afghanistan, using the pendulum, using the remote viewing, the whole thing. And okay, so here's how it works. You're viewing an event, and that event is like, let's say it's like a diamond on a woman's necklace. So you take the necklace, and the necklace has a finite point to the necklace, point A and point B, like my 2 posts of the butterfly flying back and forth. But the problem is that the time event you're viewing always moves in that time frame, in that what we would call a window or a time plateau. So in other words, time goes up and it flattens, and there's a space of time for that event to take place, and then it kind of drops down the other side if you can avoid whatever it is in that plateau. But understanding that destiny is all, and that they're going to wind up, no matter what you do, in spinning the twister wheel, you're going to wind up at the place that you view where they're at. You may not be able to say, well, they go this way, that way, the other way, but they wind up in the place that you see. So, so I do this whole thing and I say, okay, between the best I can do is the plateau shows me that between January 25th and February 5th, that your target is going to be moving with a group of other people. They've got like what looks like a wagon and they're all up on horses and camels and whatever else. And they're going to be moving through this pass outside the city of Kaust. And it's going to be between January 25th and February 5th. And she said, good, got it. Okay, there you go. And I said, well, watch this pass for that period of time. I said, can I talk about this? And she said, well, don't give any details, but yes, you may. So Melissa and I go to Las Vegas. And it was the Utah Utes playing USC in a football game. Utah won, by the way. It was just at the period of time when USC was getting good again. And we went to the casino and we were doing remote viewing at the casino. And I think we won about at least at that time between $15,000 and $18,000 doing the remote viewing at the casino. And so I went on with our bill. And so once again, 26.5 million people heard this. And it was December 28th. You can look up the show if you want. And I talked about, look, they're going to do something where they're going to kill or seriously wound bin Laden between January 25th and February 5th. So look at that time. Lo and behold, February 3rd, and there's a big public announcement by the military that says we need genetics. We need blood or samples or whatever from the bin Laden family because we believe that we've killed or at least struck or wounded Osama bin Laden, and we need to test the DNA of these. When I was on the radio. And lo and behold, military comes out February 3rd, and they announce that they need genetic material from the bin Laden family to check to see if they actually killed bin Laden. What I was told was that they hit the caravan with a cruise missile, that they wounded bin Laden badly, that he had shrapnel or something all up and down his left side, and he was completely messed up. And that I was told by these people in the Pentagon that we're not going to make a big announcement about this, but he fell over dead at some point in late April, early May. He was buried with honors somewhere near Mecca. He actually got a star on the wall at CIA because he was total scapegoat for all the things. So I'm just saying that using all of that, using remote viewing, projecting to the future, looking at these plateaus, which is the same way that I predicted so many earthquakes, you know, and I got tired of predicting earthquakes just over and over and over, making various predictions, putting them in print, by the way, so people could check them. People could hit it with a stick if they want up until 2009. When I just kind of gave up after Obama got elected president, and I predicted that, and it was just like, you know, I'm like, what's the point of doing all this anyway? Because all you do is take nothing but crap from people who are naysayers and whatever else. So anyway, and even when I was in the art school, I mean, I predicted the Ridgecrest quake. I predicted it was a no-brainer to predict the death of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, but it was a big brainer for me to predict a year in advance that Amy Coney Barrett would be the next Supreme Court justice. So, you know, so there you go. So
Sean, well then,
and the last to wrap this up,
predictions, you know, for us right here and right now, you got some predictions for the near term, or
yeah, I mean, again, I've said this from the beginning when
you probably know that New York is not going to be hit by a nuke.
Okay, well, I don't know anything, but it's I'm just saying that I've taken a look at it. I have made some predictions in the past, and this is kind of the weird thing, because if New York was going to get hit with a nuke, I always saw it coming from a boat, that it would be some kind of ship. There'd be a big exciting thing. There'd be a nuclear bomb on a ship or a boat, and that it would explode some 50 miles off the coast. Isn't it strange that you actually have a boat, an evergreen boat that got stuck somewhere that they're trying to say has a nuclear weapon on it that comes from the Chinese? You can check around that this boat was supposedly on its way towards
right now
towards New York, and it's stuck there right now. So, and I know for a fact,
maybe that's what they're seeing, that
you had a nuclear weapon that was on its way towards Washington, D.C. Back in 2006, and there was a bunch of remote viewers that went on to, you know, stop that. So, and also when it comes to destiny, one other thing that's super weird, when I was 28 years old, I went and had my Nadi leaves read in Madras, India. And it's a whole big thing where they predict your entire future. And I've got this holy man telling me that I was going to go to prison at 58 years old. Thank you. Okay, well, I'm working on it.
True, but I also work to make it true. So
not quite yet. It's still, I've still got some challenges, and I'm still trying to get to my family clinic in Mexico. All right, I'll do a few predictions for you here. Okay, so
look at the Alex Jones thing. What is
I
he,
did.
because he never said why he was crying, but it was something so terrible. He saw in the near future for humanity. You know what it
So
is?
Alex Jones is psychic now?
I'm just telling you, no, he's given information, for fuck's sake. I mean,
Okay, so I'm just saying that he's okay. Now we got to give Alex credit because both he and I talked about April 21st, April 22nd, that this was going to be, like I said, we were both talking about, and you got to give Alex credit. He said April 22nd, you watch what happens. It's going to have to do with Russia and war with Russia attacking. Got to give him some credit for that. February 21st, 22nd was when Pluto went to 27 degrees Capricorn. For years, I've been talking about the Capricorn ingress, that as soon as Capricorn goes to 27 degrees, Pluto goes to 27 degrees Capricorn, and it's going to go back and forth over this same point in the sky 4 times between now and December 21st of 2024, which is going to be Christmas. And when that happens, it's going to move into Aquarius. And when it moves into Aquarius, now you've got Pluto moving through Aquarius, which is social freedom, sexual freedom, computer AI as well, because it rules computers, magnetic devices. And it's going to be that way for 18.5 years. He can also say, I think he also said that he gave some date also as to when China was going to apparently attack Taiwan as well. But here's what you're saying. As Pluto moves across Capricorn, as the United States begins to completely fracture, and I've been talking about this period of time for forever, that we're at the end of the night of the Jaguar, that from December 21st, 2012 to December 21st of 2025 is a 13-year Mayan Tun period. Now, April 18th coming up, which is when I'm going to start my radio show, revolution.radio, is it's the Mayan New Year. It's the 3 serpent. It's the beginning of the next 260-day cycle, because the Mayans do their tuns or their years in 260 days, because that's the orbit of Venus. So when this happens, a whole new thing is going to begin to occur. Now, you're seeing what you're happening in Shanghai right now, because they've locked up 20-some million people and forgot to feed them, and they're murdering their cats, they're murdering their dogs.
Yes.
I just saw the most horrific footage I've ever seen. Well, not ever seen, but they took people's cats and stuffed them in bags and left them in the gutter. And the cats are all alive, and they're ready for the garbage truck to come around, throw the cats in the garbage truck and crush them all to death. There was a guy beating a woman's corgi to death because they're not allowing animals there because of the next wave of their COVID. Now, again, we could talk about the COVID thing where they've got the Omega virus all planned for 2024. At the same time, on April 8th of 2024, you've got a massive eclipse coming right across the United States. And it starts up in Maine. And it's the first time, I think we've had 21 eclipses in the history of the United States, comes all the way across the middle part, goes through Texas, goes through, and the end of the eclipse is at the tip of Baja California, which just so happens to be right on top of the San Andreas Fault. So when you're looking at the fracturing of the United States of north versus south, of the real, I mean, I've said over and over and over again that by the year 2025, and I've been saying this for 15 years, by the year 2025, the United States as we know it will no longer exist. That the entire form of government is going to change. And let me point out that in 2024, when this eclipse comes across, it's right before the election. Right. Okay. So I've been talking about February 21st and 22nd for years. These are okay. But as far as a nuclear weapon taking out New York, no, that's not going to happen. Actually, it physically can't happen in Southern California because if they try to take out Southern California with a missile or whatever else, we have a defense grid that would actually come up and things would just bounce off it. You have no idea how protected Southern California is. Why? Because it's the center of the military industrial, entertainment, pharmaceutical
it goes
complex.
by another name called HARP, but yeah.
Well, there's that too, but it's, it can basically, it would pop up anything. Yeah, shield. Exactly. Anything that pops up south of Santa Barbara, there's a shield that stretches between here and San Diego that I had one guy tell me about it. And then he was like, I can't believe I opened my mouth. I can't ever talk to you again. I was a weird guy because he actually worked on this thing. All right. So let's move forward from here. One way or another, Joe Biden is, and I've said this from before, Joe Biden's not going to finish his term in office. But there's a couple of possibilities because there's either a physical assassination or a political assassination. So one way or another, he's removed. Right. And then it's a question of who replaces him then. Now, let me also point out to a bunch of people, and this just started happening, I've been taking on these people who claim that Donald Trump is still president of the United States. like our buddy 107 as an example. Oh, he'll be put back in, and you don't worry, Sean, January 20th, he'll be president. So he's been wrong all along the line.
All
And
right.
again, I like him. He's my friend. He helped me out like 20 years ago. Every 20 years since 1840 in the astrological chart of the United States, you have a conjunction between Jupiter and Saturn that cuts directly across the chart of the Great White Chief, you could call it. They call it the curse of Chief Tecumseh. And so every president in our history, starting with Reagan, who just got lucky, has been assassinated in office. And of course, Reagan came that close to being assassinated. With George Bush, again, even though I said that he would somehow be removed in office, I said he's going to face an attempt in Ukraine, oddly enough, and something's going to happen to him in England. And I had 2 Secret Service guys come pound on my door and say, we hear you're, predicting the assassination of the President of the United States. And I gave them exact details as to what I saw. And they spent anywhere from 150 to 200 million dollars actually protecting Bush to make sure that that prophecy is thwarted. I don't know if that was a good thing or a bad thing, but clearly a bad thing, sort of a weird thing. As far as I was concerned, I was saving the president's life. Now get to the Trump thing. Okay. As far as the Trump thing goes, if, as 107 says, and other people say, that Trump is still president of the United States, you've heard them say this, yes?
Yes, Patel Patriot specifically is laid a very good case, a series of 19 articles, in case you haven't read them. And he has basically called it devolution, and how it was planned for him to have a government in exile. That's how he is president, by the way. If it's true. Now, he substantiated, he worked in the Trump administration. He's a very conscientious guy. He details it in, as I say, 19 articles, and he supports the fact that this is what's we're operating with 2 governments. And there's actually a religious psychic guy out there who said we would have 2 governments during this time. So in essence, it's a kind of, president in exile. That's what they call it.
Hey, thank you. That's the perfect setup for what I'm about to say.
Right.
The setup for that is, okay, folks, if Donald Trump is still president of the United States, how do you get around the constitutional amendment that you can only be president of the United States for 8 years? And how is he supposed to run for president in 2024? The
matter is that they're not going to use that time that he was president in exile as time that he spent as president.
Really? But he's still president. But you're saying that he's
with this barrister, Michael Shrimpton. Maybe you obviously didn't hear it.
I know exactly who he is. He was the intelligence agent.
You didn't hear his rationale as a barrister, going on his background and also working in intelligence in the background. So he basically did explain how this could happen from his point of view as a barrister. Okay,
as an English judge telling us about American history and how the Constitution works. Great, that's great.
With American intelligence for many, many years. All I'm saying, I'm not saying you're right, he's wrong, you're wrong, he's right. I'm not saying any of that. I'm just explaining to you that it has been explained how he's going to do that. But that's not a reason for saying he's not that now. That doesn't substantiate it in any form or fashion.
Okay, so here's what Trump has to say.
Because there's no way, wait, I've had dreams of the future, and I can tell you he's going to run for 2024, guaranteed, but he may not win. That's the question. And you just gave us reason to believe that something might interfere with that election, right?
I'm telling you that if he's still president of the United States, like all these people claim, my one question to them, my one question to Michael Shrimpton, your British barrister, my one question to 107, my one question to all these people is, how is he supposed to run for president in 2024? This last week, Trump came out and said, oh, I might not run for president in 2024 because my health is an issue. That's what he said this week. And I thought, here it comes. This is exactly what I thought was going to happen. He said his health would be an issue in 2024 and he might not run for president.
Wait.
It's my claim is he said it. He said it.
No, I'm not. Listen, what they say right now, take it with a grain of salt, especially Trump. Okay, because he's not going to tell the truth, and maybe he's trying to avoid, the next plot to kill him for the next, 2 years.
And yet he just said on his rally that I'm the most truthful man ever, and it was very funny.
Whatever. Okay.
But that leaves the path open for somebody who is probably better as president, which would be Ron DeSantis.
Yeah. Okay. So that's arguable. Some people can claim that. So that's not the point. The point is, what I'm asking you is that you said you have proof that he's not president. Saying something in the future is not proof that he's not president now. So you don't actually have any evidence of that.
I never said proof. I never said everything that, okay, I'm not the one that's not listening. It's you. I
No,
said
I'm listening
again
very
that
carefully.
how
You
is he
claimed
how is
that
he
was not
president of the
president.
United States, and how does he run again in 2024 when you have
Okay,
constitutional
I'm
limits
sorry you haven't
on him being president?
followed the
Of
storyline.
course I follow the story. Of course I know this. I got a
No,
degree in
because you
political
were in
science.
prison
I
for
know
quite
what
a
I'm
while,
talking
so
about.
you don't actually know how this works, but
Okay,
it
all
doesn't
right.
matter.
I've heard
This
every
is a
argument on
legal
this every
issue.
way.
It's a legal issue, Sean. It's a legal issue,
Okay.
okay?
And the legal issue would be, again,
Again,
how
it
does he run for
doesn't
president if he's already
substantiate,
president?
again, whether or not we have two governments, okay? I just told you, go read Patel Patriot and come back to me and let's talk about it.
Okay, all right. Well, if we can, we don't have time to talk about that entire thing now, but I know they claim that he did, by the way, dissolve, I guess what you would call the federal corporation, which is the United States Incorporated, and this is the one that was owned by the Vatican, because once again,
Right.
if the government's a corporation, who is the incorporating entity? And the incorporating entity is the Vatican, because they claim to get their power from God. And the owner and CEO was listed on Dun and Bradstreet, you used to be able to check it, as Derek R. McLeod, who's the Archbishop of the Washington, D.C. Archdiocese on Michigan and 4th Street. That's gone. I don't know how it's gone, but apparently Trump dissolved that corporation. This was all
That's right.
directly,
And
we're
so he's
talking about the
also
night of the Jaguar.
well,
He
president
dissolved
of
all
the
this,
Republic. That's,
created the
kind
Space
of.
Force, which by the way, still has a constitutional limitation of 8 years. And if he's
I
president, he
know.
can't run again in 2024.
I know, but
Just
you
saying.
have to,
And all
it
you
doesn't
guys are
matter.
saying
You don't
that
understand the rationale.
that he's still the commander in chief. That's possible. That he's still president of the Republic. That still gives him a limit
Even
of
if
8
he
years.
is, okay, let's look at the near future and let's talk about the global reset, because that's what's really facing our country right now. And though what everyone has said, there was a meeting in Dubai, I guess you heard about it, that they called it the World Government Meeting with the, you know, that guy, what's his name, Schwab or whatever he calls himself.
Schwab.
Yeah, so they basically announced the global reset, okay? Now, that was just on the 31st of March. So that's just a week or two ago, right?
Well, it's basically Klaus Schwab basically telling everybody how they're going to murder most of the people on Earth.
Exactly. So
And how they're going to take out 80% of the population
no,
to go back to their $500 million thing. Okay.
I want to know right now, if you look in the near term, we're talking the next year, is the global reset going to go into effect? Are we going to go into a grapes of wrath? Again, we started the conversation saying Alex Jones burst into tears. What's he crying about? For God's sake, do you know?
Well, we are facing a potential situation of war with a nuclear superpower where you could actually possibly, there is the possibility now, and this is where future timelines come into challenge, possibility we could lose 2 billion people. What's going on? I told you that, again, when you have Putin saying, I will strangle the New World Order with my bare hands if necessary, and you have the New World Order now completely in charge of the economic system, of the government, of both houses of government, of the President of the United States, and do not think for a second, for a moment, that these people would stop by using nuclear weapons. As a matter of fact, 2 nuclear weapons were used in the overthrow of the Ukraine back in 2014. That same footage was regurgitated by Jim Stone, oddly enough, and I had to call Jim to heel to say, this is old footage, man. These bombs that you're talking about, this happened in 2014 and the first overthrow of the Ukrainian government. Now, let me finish.
Are you aware of the Simpsons show?
Simpsons episode about 2022 and the nuclear bomb. And
no,
doesn't mean the Simpsons are always right.
2022, 5/5. That's May 5th, 2022.
Okay, right, and they have the nuclear bomb in the background and all that. Doesn't mean the Simpsons have psychic powers. They probably just looked at the challenge of what's going on.
When you work for the people that are creating these events, that gives you a lot of leeway.
Okay, well, the New World Order is in a bunch of trouble. Not only in a bunch of trouble, but their entire financial system is going down the tubes.
Right.
That when you cut off the head of the snake, which makes no doubt about it, but the Khazarian mafia and Khazar, if you will, or Khazaria, which used to be, by the way, where we get the word Cossack from, because they were absolutely brutal. And by the way, this is where all of the supposed Ashkenazic, not Sephardic, mind you, but the Ashkenazic Jews come from, because they all converted to Judaism in the 8th century, because they were right between Christian Russia, Christian Europe, and Islam. So they switched to Judaism because you had all the rabbis escaping Rome who knew everything about the banking and whatever else. Now that you've got Putin cutting off the head of the snake, that means that the New World Order guys, including Schwab, including Soros, including all these scumbags that now the public is finally hearing about on things like Fox News,
Right.
with these genius guys like Tucker Carlson, et cetera.
And the White Hats, Trump and the White Hats might have something to do with this as well. Do you know?
So when Fox, which is the mainstream media now and has the most popular shows on TV, is not only telling you this, but at the same time, so by taking out Ukraine, you're taking out their bioweapons labs, which means they can take out COVID. By taking out Ukraine, you're taking out their banks. They're taking out the places where they launder all their money, which is why you have Hunter Biden and the kids of John Kerry and Nancy Pelosi and all these scumbags are all, why do they all work for Ukrainian oil companies? Because it's a way for them to launder billions, if not trillions of dollars. That's gone. And let me tell you, let me finish the sentence. Let me finish the sentence here. Because now with Afghanistan, the thing that triggered the Afghan war was because when the Taliban took over the country in 2001, in January of 2001, they burned the poppy fields. The United States said, okay, all right, here's $450 million to replant the poppy fields. Okay, that's a good joke. Haha, funny. And they said, no, thank you, great Satan. We're going to use this money to, build some roads and some schools. Then they were like, okay, look, we'll give you more money, but in exchange, you're going to give us a Unocal pipeline that runs through Afghanistan. And they said, and the United States, this is Colin Powell, who actually threatened him with this, said we can give you what was it, a river of money or a carpet of bombs, is what they said. This was July. We then started putting all of our military stuff, and we started building up our army in Pakistan. Getting already, this was the run up to the whole 9/11 thing. We had a big army up in Pakistan because when you take 60 billion cash off the global markets in heroin, which is what they did at that time, people notice. So we went into Afghanistan. The United States military's entire job for the last 20 years, I don't care if you fought there or not, was to basically run the heroin trade. And now, guess what? The Taliban's not only back in, but as part of some deal with them to make sure that we could fight them in the future, we left them with $1 billion worth of weapons. We left them with tanks and guns and the whole thing so they can defend themselves. Sure. You know what they're doing? They're burning the poppy fields again. Now they're taking 100 billion cash off the global markets, which means here's a prediction for you. They're going to overthrow Pakistan. Pakistan is next on the list, so they can move into Pakistan, overturn the Pakistani government. That's a future prediction if you live in Pakistan. So there they go, because they're going to move the entire heroin trade in Pakistan. That's number one. Number two, what you're seeing in Shanghai right now, with a lockdown of 15 million people that they're forgetting to feed, that's what they have plans for cities in the United States. That's what they've got planned for in the next couple of months. And if you think I'm kidding, you watch what just done to Shanghai. Now there's going to be a political and social revolt against the communist government. They're literally teetering on the edge, but you're going to see a massive revolt because remember, Shanghai was their most prosperous city. We built a Disneyland there, for God's sakes, and the place used to be owned by the British. Now they're locking them all inside there, and the most prosperous city in China. Yes. And they're cutting off their own face. Why? Why do the COVID thing again? Why kill everybody's cats and dogs? Why impose this? According to Mark vicious aspect,
they have to get rid of 500 million people.
Why?
And so this is what they're working on.
Okay, again, why? Because there's two futures. You want to know the two futures, that whether looking glass or predictive astrology? If you look at the Great Pyramid of Giza, that I always look to because it's predicted all the major patterns so far. Although here's the challenge. Since 2005, Nostradamus is wrong. Edgar Cayce, wrong. Gordon Michael Scallion, wrong. I mean, I was the only one left standing of being right about, I would say, 80% of what's going on. Even if you look at the Great Pyramid of Giza, there are aspects in the Great Pyramid that says after 2012 or in that period, there should have been a massive culling of the population. Now, here's another prediction. When the Great Pyramid says this and suddenly we just coast right past it and nothing happens, there are two possible futures. The pyramid talks about a massive period of depopulation from 2012 until approximately 2034, to the point of where there is such chaos that apparently the extraterrestrials step in And there's some kind of event that I call the day of appearance, where we literally have to have every ship in this quadrant of the galaxy appear for one day to reorganize the earth or set it on a proper path or do what have you. Because now we're looking at the book of Isaiah. Now we're looking at Ezekiel. Now we're not so much looking at Revelation, which makes no sense. It doesn't have a timeline, but we still have a whole plethora of prophecies in the Old Testament that have not yet come true, which includes Germany and Russia invading Israel. That's in Ezekiel 38 and 39, et cetera, et cetera. Now we got two possibilities here. The possibility is number one, and even the nonsensical viewing thing, that the whole I forgot about it. The whole April 18th prediction says that if this doesn't happen on April 18th, then we're looking at some kind of new timeline of something better that's going to happen. The pyramid talks about how everybody has to be sort of wiped off the face of the earth. Then there's a messianic figure who comes, oddly enough, October 31st of 2039. Now, the pyramid predicted the birth of Christ in 2 BC and not only predicted the date of the supposed birth, but also predicted the location as being within about 100 yards of the city of Bethlehem. So you can pretty much point to the pyramid as being correct, but it's not. And so if that's the case, if what's built in stone that Isaiah said that we would look to the pyramid in the last days, because everything else would be screwed up, we do have the possibility of having a population of 7 or 8 billion people who walk into a future, standing up and smiling, that develops the technology that allows us to move forward. Here's the other thing. This is what most people don't realize. You had a great occultist, I guess you'd call her, at the beginning of the 20th century, called Madame Blavatsky. And we'll see if this happens. Blavatsky's prediction was, and I've been a kind of a champion behind it, but we'll see if it happens, is that on June 1st, of this year, so today's April 15th, April 13th, so April, May, June, in 2.5 months, she said that there would be a Death Star that would appear in the sky in the constellation of Cygnus the Swan. Now, my friend Andy Collins wrote a book called The Cygnus Mystery, because swans represent royalty, represent the death of royalty, represent, once again, the destruction of governments based on royalty, because everything you're seeing with Pluto moving through Capricorn right now is about the destruction of governments, financial systems, the reset that you're talking about. Now, again, if it's a reset if you look at history, the exact same thing is happening to us as happened to the Weimar Republic in the 1930s. Same thing. Okay, what was happening then? They hyperinflated the currency. It took you a wheelbarrow full of money to be able to buy a piece of bread. You've seen the news clips, right? And that's who it sounds like. All these people out there, all the patriot guys and all that, we need some sort of authoritarian ruler or Trump or whatever to come along and save us from from whatever's going down.
Okay,
now, they're going to have to do something with US.
Wait, Sean,
okay,
slow down. Right. I want to draw your attention to this. I just made a video, and I'm telling you, Lincoln, this car company, is doing this all the time now. And you just said that there was going to be this Death Star. That's one of the predictions. Okay. And all I'm showing you is that they're showing like an Earth-like thing. They're saying the power of sanctuary, and they're basically showing you this planet that is kind of in our face. Now, is that predictive programming? Why are they pushing this scenario with the car Lincoln right now? And there might be a link up also to Lincoln. They like to work with symbols. They like to tell you before they're going to do something. Any thoughts on that?
Okay, look, I've been fighting the Planet X people since 2003. When Nancy Leader was getting messages from the Zeta Reticulans.
That's not, I don't want to go down that road. I'm not
well, me neither,
I'm
but okay, if you're
showing you what the Lincoln ad is showing you. So,
okay, all right,
here's something to this Swan Death Star thing that you were talking about. This is an indicator.
Okay, here's what NASA, I will tell you.
Not what I am saying, it's what they are saying.
Okay, I'll tell you what NASA says. We accept what NASA says. I know it's never a straight answer.
No, NASA never a straight answer. But
I know, and they lie all the time. Here's what they say. They claim that they call it the Big Boom, and that there were 2 supernovas that collided in 1638. Remember, I told you that when we go outside and look at the sky, we're looking millions of years in the past, and that's a form of time viewing, because we're looking at light that's coming from the stars.
It relates to Paul LaViolette and the superwave. But go ahead.
Okay, well, again, NASA has said that on June 1st of 2022, that this pair of supernovas that collided in 1638, that the light is going to reach us, and that we are going to see a giant brilliant star in the sky that will be as bright as the moon. That's going to appear on the, it's going to be, well, actually, if you give me a second, that's going to appear on the left wing of Cygnus. Now, Cygnus is interesting because, let me see if I can find, I'll actually, I don't know if you, I don't know if we have time for me to do this, but hold on. I can actually find it and I can put it up for you. So Blavatsky talked about how this this super wave or this supernova would bring the great culling of men and animals at that time, and she called it the Death Star, and that it was going to come in the beginning of the 21st century. And so, and she talked about Cygnus being this. Now, what does Cygnus rule? Again, it rules royalty, it rules monarchies. The swan is also a symbol for Lucifer because it's a very beautiful animal. But if you've ever been in a fight with,
and the queen is in charge of all the swans on earth.
Yeah, and if you ever gotten a fight with one on a golf course, which I have, it's they're pretty mean, nasty animals. Here we go. Okay, this is all right. So I'm sharing the screen. I'm gonna click on this. I'll give you a couple of things. So share that. Okay, can you see it now?
Yes. Well, we can see what looks like a presentation.
Yes,
Last
there you go.
time
Okay.
Saturn was in Aquarius. Go ahead.
Right. Was during the Rodney King riots. The last time Pluto was in Capricorn was during the American Revolution. It was there from 1770 until 1790. Neptune was in Pisces with Rome. When Rome fell, we have all three of those right now.
Okay.
Here is, okay, so here is, just to give you an idea. Okay, there's Madame Blavatsky. All right. Here's Blavatsky, who was friends with Manly P. Hall, Aleister Crowley, was one of the founders of the Theosophical Society, et cetera, et cetera. This is what NASA says. When stars collide, Dr. Daniel Brown of Nottingham Trent University explains the curious case of the boom star. These are these two supernovas that have smashed together in 1638, which was actually a very interesting year. There is Cygnus, Pisces, Hercules, Virgo, the Corona Borealis, Canis Minor, one of the dogs that chases Hercules around. And this is actually coming summer of 2022, is where you see the red dot there is actually where on the left wing of Cygnus the Swan will appear. And this is what, and we're right in the phase right now where everything is lining up for this massive culling of men and animals.
Okay, where is Earth in this picture?
Oh, this is, we're here looking at that. That's a silly question. This is a constellation. When you say where's Earth in the picture, we're back here looking up at the sky.
Oh, I see.
So this is us looking up at the sky. This is Cygnus. This is Cygnus here, right here. This cross, all this period right here.
I don't always see things from this vantage point of Earth.
That's okay. So
there are no silly questions, and it's not a silly question.
When the sun goes across,
where you are.
This is here. You can see the arrow. This is the bright arrow here, which is where the supernova is going to be as this bright star. Okay, from here, like for example, the moon and the sun go along the ecliptic, which would be where the arrow is moving across it. And again, I'm just saying that you want a prediction of culling of men and animals. I just watched them in Shanghai.
So this is
round up people's animals and murder them.
Okay, this is Blavatsky's prediction, in other words.
Madame Blavatsky made the prediction. NASA is now telling us that prediction is coming true. I'm telling you that right here, that if this supernova appears, as NASA is telling us, in line with Blavatsky's prediction, I'm saying that everything lines up. So, whatever. So, and the one last thing I'll leave us with is that these were the dates of, and I'm sorry, I got the one date wrong, which is at the top. I need to change that. But Pluto first crosses 27 degrees Capricorn. This was April 22nd of 2022, and it lasts until August 4th of 2022. Therefore, this conflict between Russia and the United States is going to continue through the summer. This was April 22nd. I was talking about this here. I got it wrong on this chart, but it's April 22nd. This is also what Alex Jones was talking about when the Russians would attack. This is what I was talking about, saying if the Russians would attack, that we have a war with Russia and then it goes retrograde and crosses again December 2nd. So if you guys want to take a picture of the screenshot, every single one of these flux points here, December 10, November 1st, January of 2024 for 9 months back into Capricorn. Every single one of this is going to be stress points in which you're going to see collapses of banks, collapses of governments, collapses of monetary systems, everything ruled by Capricorn, which, by the way, I don't know how England is going to get involved with this, but England is a Capricorn country with Aries rising. So something's going to happen with something's going to happen with this. So I don't know if we,
Okay, now let me ask you a question. You're
yeah,
aware of the Henoch prophecies, Billy Meyer?
intimately, yes. And again,
Okay, and
it's
then
because
you
Billy
know, okay,
Meyer claims that he's
can I finish my
Hanok.
question?
Yeah,
Wait
sure.
1 second. Okay, so what they basically have said, because I'm very familiar with them as well. And what they said was that Russia would start on the side of China and then move to side with the United States against China and Iran. That is the prediction.
Okay. That's sounds kind of accurate to me. But again, Billy's, some of those things are right. And some of those have been
That's
immensely
right. But
wrong.
I have always remembered this because I thought it was very interesting. And I think because of the relationship between Putin and Trump, that there's very likely some validity there.
Okay. Well, and again, Edgar Casey talked about how, Russia would be a great friend to the United States, and that
Well,
there's been all
there are
kinds of
pal
prophecies
in the
about
secret
Russia
space
saving the
program.
world.
Hello.
I'm sorry.
We're partners in the secret space program. Okay.
Yes, indeed.
So,
Oh, okay. Well,
and
again,
you know
you
that.
can
All
point
right.
to
Thank you,
all of
Sean.
this being a puppet show in the front. All of this is all. It's again, all these guys are all part of the mother corporation from the top, if you will, that are all really moving behind the scenes, and maybe all this conflict is just complete nonsense and all just political theater. Anyway, at the end of all this, again, we're integrating the right and left-hand sides of the brain from December 21st of 2012 to December 21st of 2025. The real thing that's going on here is for all of us to start coming together, to start reintegrating the left and the right hand sides of the brain, for the male and the female to finally come together. We finally, for the first time in 26,000 years almost, have access to 100% of our mind and brain, and a final integration of this. And the bad guys, who are in a lot of trouble, in way more trouble than you think, because of what's going to happen with their financial system, we've given them enough rope that they've hung themselves. And so with the end of the heroin coming out of Afghanistan, with the end of their financial system, with the point that they've hyperinflated the currency to such a point that we're going to have to do something to get back to which quite easily would be just maybe Trump getting in and backing the entire US money system with gold, which would be the reset that they're talking about. And the bankers and the New World Order or old order guys are just in a complete panic because, now we're going to the Mayan aspect that, all is one, life has purpose, God is love. And if we all realize that, then we'll get back to some kind of paradise. And my prayer is that we walk into the future and accept whoever's coming as the messianic figure, standing up, smiling, picking and a grinning, rather than on our knees and all dead. Is that a good way to end it?
That's a beautiful way to end it. I just wanted to get us back to the screen here where we're able to see you again.
Okay, thank you.
And it's kind of,
let me quit this.
a little messed up, but it's
well, I got to show you some charts, so that's the good part.
So that's very good. Thank you. I think the Cygnus piece and the Blavatsky and NASA piece for June. You said June 1st of 2022. So I think people can pay attention to that and see if there's going to be any validity there. And forward, forward.
Onwards, upwards, fight on, as we say at USC.
Christian soldiers, forward.
Yeah. Last thing is just everybody go to the website, strangeuniverseradio.com. All the books are up. Sands of Time 1, 2, 3, and 4. Timerunner, seem to be either a TV series or a major motion picture. We also have the meditation CDs as well, or the meditation tapes. God Force Meditation is fantastic and wonderful. But for the first time in a long time, we finally have what have been called the greatest disclosure books ever written, and one of the greatest sci-fi fact series ever written, because they're the ultimate disclosure books. We're going to be advertising in American Free Press as well, so that people can actually subscribe to American Free Press and get it all. But for the first time, we actually have we have product up that people can get. The books are back in print, and you're not going to be disappointed in Timerunner. It's fantastic. I'm sending you directly at the end of this conversation, by the way, I'm going to send you a PDF of Timerunner. You'll also get a signed book as well. That'll be worth thousands of dollars in the future. And but everything's back on track. I can't thank you enough. I literally have the place where I live now because of you. I'm alive because of you. Because enough people.
Because of my audience.
And because your audience as well. So enough people said enough prayers. I still have a challenge with the throat cancer. I still got to get healed. But I have a place to live. I've done enough remote viewing.
Peace with the fact that you are now able to speak, whereas they were stopping you from speaking before. You have to forgive them, and then that will help clear up the cancer.
Do I have to really?
Yeah.
I have to? Okay. After all the bad things I
know,
did.
but don't stay angry. I mean, it's easy to say and hard to do. I'm not saying, this stuff is easy, but you are a miracle walking,
Yeah.
literally.
Well, it's also when you realize that from the naughty leadings back when I was like 28, that this was all part of the destiny, and
That's right.
destiny
You
is
chose
all.
it. So when you
And
realize that you chose it as a soul because it would be the way you would grow the most, don't regret it.
yeah, it's the hero's journey. Indeed, it's
That's right.
it's Han Solo fighting the evil empire. With my
Yep.
my faithful cat Shalou, and of course my lovely wife Melissa. So anyway, everybody.
All right. Thank you so much, Sean.
Wait, if somebody wants to say goodbye, go on, make a nice face.
Oh.
Go on, there you go.
Oh my God. It's like a reincarnation of my kitty.
I know. There you go. Yeah, it's yeah. Talou was wonderful. He was one of Shalou's kids. Actually, no, his brother or his kid.
It
was his brother.
I don't know if they're.
Yeah.
Your cat Shalou's not that old, is he? Or is he?
No, it's your cat's brother. So Shalou here, was named after his daddy who died.
Well, my cat was over like something like 12 years old, I think.
Okay, well, Shalou is one of his brothers. So
Oh,
this is Shalou, and he was one of his brothers from another litter. But yes, it's his half brother. So just saying. So, and by the way, we're gonna have new kittens pretty soon. So as soon as because Shalou is single and ready to mingle, so he's got a girlfriend waiting for him somewhere in Chicago. And as soon as that happens, we'll make sure the first blue-eyed white wonderful Norwegian forest cat goes to you. Okay.
Awesome.
Gary, can't thank you enough. You're like my sister. You're like in so many different ways. Love you to death. I love your knowledge. I love your wisdom. I love your grace. I love everything that you know. And just keep on it. Like I said, we say at USC, fight on. So we just keep fighting on, right?
Yep.
All right.
And thanks everyone for watching. This will go onto my website, onto Rumble. So stand by for that. But for now, it's still on Facebook. It may not stay there, but for what it's worth.
All right, Strange Universe Radio. Everybody tune in next Monday and come to the website, the Strange Universe Radio website. Everything's up finally. Excellent. So look forward to seeing you, look forward to talking to you, and look forward to moving on. Like I say, it's a great, big, beautiful tomorrow waiting at the end of every day. Bye-bye. Fight on.
All right.
Fight on.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, baby.